Now listen here, child. Gather close by this old firelight where shadows dance like the ghosts of our ancestors rising from the blood-soaked Virginia soil. I'm going to tell you about Peggy of the Hot Box, Peggy de Caixa Quente, the black woman who was baked alive for 90 long days in that iron coffin, and how she locked her sinho inside till he cooked in his own wickedness. This ain't no tale from the white folks' books, no. This here's memory carried in the marrow, passed down through the quarters in hushed voices when the patty rollers slept. So hush now, and open your ears to what the earth still remembers. The night Massa Elias Hawthorne came to Peggy's cabin, the air hung thick as molasses over Hawthorne plantation, heavy with the scent of magnolias and the metallic bite of coming rain. It was late summer 1847, when the cotton bolls burst white under that merciless Virginia sun, and the quarters, them ramshackle cabins leaning against one another like wounded soldiers, sat dark and silent save for the low hum of spirituals sung soft so the overseer wouldn't hear. Peggy was 28 years old then, a woman built strong as the oaks that lined the plantation roads, with skin dark as fertile earth and eyes that carried the weight of too many sorrows. Her back bore the scars of 39 lashes she took 3 years prior when she tried to run after her boy Josiah, 6 years old, sweet-faced, was sold downriver to some Georgia hellhole. That whipping post had drunk deep from her blood, but it never broke her spirit. No, child, it only made the rage simmer hotter, like a pot left too long on the fire. She lived in a cabin at the far end of the quarters with old Aunt Dinah, a root woman whose fingers knew the secrets of herbs, and whose eyes could see through the veil between this world and the next. The cabin walls were thin as paper, chinked with mud that cracked in the heat, and the floor was just hard-packed dirt that turned to soup when the rains came. But it was hers, Lord have mercy, the only space in this wretched world she could call something near her own. That night, Peggy sat on a three-legged stool mending a torn sack by the light of a tallow candle. Her hands moved steady, though her heart was troubled. Aunt Dinah had warned her that morning, mixing roots in a clay bowl, her voice low and knowing. "Child, I seen something dark coming for you. Keep your prayers close and your eyes open. The devil walks in fine linen on this plantation." The old woman had pressed a mojo bag into Peggy's palm, filled with High John the Conqueror root, sulfur, and a lock of hair from Peggy's dead mama, whispering, "Wear this round your neck. It might not stop what's coming, but it'll remind you who you belong to. You ain't his, hear me? You belong to the ancestors." Peggy had tied that bag tight beneath her threadbare shift, feeling it rest against her breastbone like a second heartbeat. She heard his boots before she saw him, that heavy entitled stride that made folks scatter like field mice when a hawk's shadow passes. Massa Elias Hawthorne, 35 years of pride and cruelty wrapped in fine broadcloth and bourbon breath, appeared in her doorway without knocking. White men never knocked on quarters' doors. They came and took what they pleased, same as they took land, labor, and lives. "Evening, Peggy," he drawled, his voice thick with drink and desire. His pale eyes raked over her like she was livestock at auction. "Thought I'd pay you a visit. Been thinking on you all day out in them fields." Peggy's needle stopped mid-stitch. Her stomach turned to ice. She'd seen this coming. Lord, every enslaved woman on every plantation knew this shadow that stalked the quarters at night. But knowing and facing it are two different things, child. Two very different things. She stood slow, her body tall and defiant even as her mind raced. "Massa, it's late. I gotta be up before first light for the cotton gin." He stepped inside, closing the distance between them with 2 strides. The cabin suddenly felt small as a coffin. "You telling me no, girl?" His voice dropped low, dangerous. "You forgetting your place?" Old Aunt Dinah, sleeping in the corner on a pallet of corn shucks, stirred and opened one eye. She saw what was happening and went still as death, her lips moving in silent prayer. Peggy's hand went to the mojo bag beneath her shift, fingers clutching it tight. She thought of her mama, stolen from Africa, who'd whispered her true name, her African name, into Peggy's ear before the fever took her. That name was Power, child, a name the white folks could never speak, never own. And in that moment, Peggy remembered she was more than a slave. She was a daughter of kings, of warriors, of women who'd survived the Middle Passage when the sea tried to swallow them whole. "I ain't forgetting nothing, massa," she said, her voice steady as stone. "But my body ain't yours to take." The words hung in the air like gun smoke. Hawthorne's face went red as a whipping post after a beating. "What did you say to me?" He grabbed her arm, fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. "You uppity." Peggy wrenched free, something ancient and fierce rising up in her chest. "I said no!" She shoved him. Lord have mercy. She put both hands on that white man's chest and shoved him hard. He stumbled back, shocked, his mouth hanging open like a catfish pulled from the Rappahannock. For 3 heartbeats there was silence. Then the devil climbed into Elias Hawthorne's eyes and made itself at home. He lunged at her, grabbing her by the hair, and Peggy fought like a cornered panther. She scratched, bit, kicked, drawing blood from his cheek, tearing his fine shirt. Aunt Dinah screamed, "Leave her be! Leave her be, you wicked man!" But Hawthorne was past hearing. He dragged Peggy out that cabin door, her feet scraping against the dirt, her screams tearing through the night like a wild thing caught in a trap. The other quarters came alive, doors cracking open, faces peering out in terror and pity, but nobody moved. Folks knew better. Interfering meant the whip, or worse. He pulled her into the middle of the torero, that open space where the overseer held morning roll call, and where the whipping post stood like a silent witness to countless sufferings. The moon hung fat and yellow overhead, casting long shadows. Hawthorne's face was twisted with rage and something darker, humiliation. A black woman had dared refuse him, had dared fight back, and in his world that was a sin beyond forgiven. "You want to act like an animal?" he snarled, ripping her shift clean off her body till she stood naked under that accusing moon. "Then I'll treat you like one." Peggy's arms went to cover herself, but she didn't lower her eyes. "No, child." She stared straight at him with all the fury of her mama, her grandmama, and every stolen soul who'd come before. The quarters watched in horror. Big Moses, the blacksmith, clenched his fists so hard his knuckles went white. The conjure woman, Mother Bess, began a low moaning prayer that sounded like it came from the bottom of a well. Hawthorne called for his overseer, a mean-spirited devil named Pritchard, who came running with keys jangling from his belt. "Open it!" Hawthorne commanded, pointing to a structure at the edge of the yard that made folks' blood run cold. The hot box. That infernal iron cage buried half in the ground, no bigger than a coffin, with slits for air that let in scorching heat and nothing else. It was punishment, torture, a taste of hell on earth. Pritchard unlocked the heavy iron door with a grin that showed his rotten teeth. Peggy's heart hammered against her ribs, but she didn't beg, wouldn't give him that satisfaction. Hawthorne leaned close, his breath hot against her ear. 90 days, Peggy. 90 days to think about your place. And when you come out, if you come out, you'll remember who owns you. They shoved her inside that iron tomb. The door clanged shut with a sound like the gates of hell slamming closed. Darkness swallowed her whole. The space was so small she couldn't stand, couldn't lie straight. Just crouch in that suffocating heat with her knees to her chest. Outside, Hawthorne's voice carried clear through the night air, cold and final. "Tomorrow you gon' learn what fire really means, girl. Tomorrow you gon' learn." And then his footsteps faded away, leaving Peggy alone in the darkness with nothing but the beating of her own heart and the whisper of her ancestors in the hot, stale air. Darkness, child. Not the darkness of a moonless night or a shuttered room, but the darkness of the grave. Thick, suffocating, alive with heat that pressed down on Peggy like the hand of judgment itself. In them days of deep sorrow, when the sun rose over Hawthorne Plantation on that first morning, it didn't bring hope. It brought hellfire. The iron box was barely 4 feet long and 3 feet wide, sunk halfway into the Virginia clay like a casket waiting to be filled permanent. Peggy couldn't stand, couldn't stretch her legs, couldn't do nothing but crouch with her knees pulled tight to her chest, her naked back pressing against metal that was already warming with the sunrise. The air inside tasted like rust and fear. Through the narrow slits, barely wider than a finger, thin beams of light cut through the blackness. Peggy pressed her eye to one, desperate for something beyond the suffocating dark, and saw the plantation waking up. She heard the overseer's bell clanging harsh and insistent, calling folks to the fields, heard the shuffle of tired feet and the low voices of her people moving past, some throwing glances toward the hot box but none daring to stop. Lord have mercy, she thought. This is how it begins. By mid-morning, when that Virginia sun climbed high and mean, the iron started cooking. The heat rose slow at first, then faster, turning the box into an oven. Peggy's skin began to slick with sweat that had nowhere to go, no breeze to dry it. It ran down her face, her neck pooled in the hollow of her throat. Her breath came short and panicked, each inhale drawing in air so hot it burned her lungs. She pressed her mouth to one of the slits, gasping, and tasted dust and desperation. God, Jesus, ancestors, she whispered, her voice already hoarse. Help me. The old ones say that suffering has a sound, a low moan that rises from the belly of a soul being crushed. Peggy made that sound now, rocking back and forth in that cramped space, her body already cramping from the position. Her muscles screamed. Her throat was dry as cotton lint. And the heat, sweet Jesus, the heat. It was like being roasted alive, slow and deliberate. By noon she was crying out loud, her voice carrying across the yard. Water, please, water. Nobody came. The field hands heard her. Big Moses heard her. Old Aunt Dinah heard her. Mother Bess, the root woman, heard her. But they kept working, heads down, hands moving through cotton bowls, hearts heavy with grief and helplessness. The overseer Pritchard sat on his horse nearby, chewing tobacco and grinning every time Peggy's voice rose in agony. Sing, girl, he called out, mocking. Sing one of them spirituals you people love so much. But Peggy couldn't sing, could barely breathe. The sun climbed higher and the iron box became a furnace. The metal burned against her skin wherever she touched it, her back, her shoulders, her thighs. She tried shifting, but there was nowhere to go. The sweat that poured from her body began to steam in that enclosed space, creating a fog of heat and moisture that made it even harder to draw breath. Her mind started playing tricks. She saw her mama standing at the door of the box, reaching out a hand, smiling sad. She saw her boy Josiah, his little face pressed against the auction block in Richmond, calling, Mama, Mama, before the white man led him away in chains. She saw Africa, a place she'd never been but lived in her blood. Green hills and baobab trees, drums beaten in celebration, her people free and proud before the slavers came with their nets and guns. Mama, she whimpered. Mama, I can't. Then, just when the world started going gray at the edges, when her heart felt like it might give out from the heat and the fear, she heard it. A voice, faint, coming from outside. Sister. Sister, you hear me? Peggy's eye flew to the slit. She couldn't see who was speaking, but the voice was deep, familiar. Big Moses, the blacksmith, her brother in bondage, though not by blood. Moses, she croaked. Shh, don't talk loud. I'm here, we all here, you ain't alone, you hear me? You ain't alone in this. Tears spilled hot down Peggy's face, mixing with the sweat. I can't do this. 90 days, Moses. 90 days. You can, he said, his voice steady and strong as the iron he worked. You strong, Peggy. Stronger than him, stronger than all of them. The ancestors didn't bring you this far to let you die in that box. There was a pause, then he spoke again, lower, urgent. Listen to me good. We working on something, can't tell you now, but we working. You just gotta hold on, sister, just hold on. What you mean? But there was a shout in the distance, the overseer yelling for Moses to get back to the forge, and his footsteps hurried away. Moses? Peggy called, but he was gone. She pressed her forehead against the hot metal and sobbed. Hold on to what? To breath, to sanity, to hope. The afternoon dragged on like a whip pulling slow across bare skin. The heat didn't lessen. If anything, it grew worse. Peggy's lips cracked. Her tongue swelled thick in her mouth. Her thoughts scattered like startled birds, fluttering and disordered. She began to pray, not in English, but in fragments of the old tongue her mama had whispered. Yoruba words she barely remembered but her soul recognized. Words for protection, for endurance, for vengeance. Olodumare, hear me. Ocean, carry my tears. Ogun, give me iron strength. Oya, warrior mother, don't let me break. Evening came slow, the sun finally dipping toward the horizon, and the temperature in the box dropped just enough to let Peggy draw a full breath without feeling like her lungs would catch fire. She slumped against the side, exhausted beyond words, her body trembling. Footsteps approached. The door of the hot box creaked open a few inches, not enough to let her out, just enough for someone to shove a tin cup of water and a hard biscuit through the gap. The water was warm, barely enough to wet her mouth, and the biscuit was stale and tasteless. But it was life. So she drank, she ate, and she survived one more hour. As full dark fell over the plantation, Peggy heard the quarters come alive with night sounds. The distant creak of cabin doors, the low murmur of voices, the mournful wail of a spiritual sung soft. Wade in the water. Wade in the water, children. God's gonna trouble the water. She closed her eyes and let the song wrap around her like a blanket. The old folks believed water could wash away sin, could break curses, could carry the spirit to freedom. Maybe, she thought, maybe if she could just hold on long enough, water would come for her too. Then, just before she drifted into a fitful sleep, she heard it again, that whisper through the slit, so faint she almost missed it. Hold on, sister. We comin'. It wasn't Moses this time, it was a woman's voice, Mother Bess, the conjure woman. And slipped through the slit came something small and soft, a bundle wrapped in cloth tied with twine. Peggy grabbed it, her fingers shaking. Inside was a piece of high john root, a pinch of gopher dust, and a tiny scrap of paper with symbols scratched on it in charcoal. Marks of protection, of resistance, of power drawn from the earth and the spirits of the dead. Peggy clutched it to her chest, her heart pounding not with fear now, but with something else, something fierce and ancient. They ain't forgot me, she thought. My people ain't forgot me. And in the hot, stifling darkness of that iron coffin, on the first day of 90, Peggy made herself a promise. I will survive this. And when I get out, Elias Hawthorne gon' learn what it means to burn. Outside, under a sky heavy with stars the ancestors used to navigate their way to freedom, Big Moses stood at his forge, hammer in hand, and began heating a piece of iron in the flames. He was making a key that would fit the lock of the hotbox, a key that would change everything. Now listen here, child, 'cause what I'm about to tell you cuts deeper than whip scars, reaches further back than the auction block, all the way across that cursed middle passage to the land our people was stolen from. This here's about names, you understand? Not the names the white folks give us, them plantation names like Peggy and Moses and Dinah, but the real names, the true names, the ones whispered in the dark that carry power the masters can't touch. In that hot box on the third night, when the heat finally broke enough for Peggy to think straight, when her body had gone past pain into something else, a kind of numbness where the flesh gives up but the spirit holds on, her mind drifted back through the years of bondage, back through the cotton fields and the whipping post, back to when she was just a little girl of 7 summers, sitting on the dirt floor of a slave cabin with her mama. Her mama's name, the one the white folks called her, was Ruth. But that weren't her real name. No, child. Her real name was Ayodele, which in the Yoruba tongue means joy has come home. Though Lord knows there weren't much joy in them Virginia slave quarters, her mama carried that name like a shield against the suffering, a reminder that she'd once been free, once been somebody beyond bondage. Peggy, or what was left of her in that iron coffin, could see her mama clear as day in her mind's eye. A woman strong-backed and proud despite the chains, with skin black as midnight, and eyes that held the memory of Africa like sacred fire. Her mama had survived the belly of a slave ship, suffering so bad folks said half the cargo died before they reached Charleston Harbor. She'd been packed in there like firewood, chained to corpses, breathing air so foul it could kill a strong man. But Adele survived. Lord have mercy, she survived. The memory came sharp now, vivid as if Peggy was there again. It was winter, and the cabin was cold enough to see your breath. Her mama had pulled her close by the weak light of a tallow candle. Check in first to make sure old Aunt Dinah was asleep in the corner. Check in that no eyes or ears was near. Then she'd spoken low, her voice carrying the weight of ancestors. "Chilly, I got something to tell you. Something you can't never speak aloud, less you ready to die for it. You listening?" Little Peggy had nodded, her heart beating fast with the solemnity of the moment. "The white folks, they took our bodies, took our freedom, took our land across the water. But they can't take everything, you hear? They can't take what they don't know about." Her mama's fingers had gripped her shoulders tight. "You got two names, Chili. One is Peggy. That's the name they give you, the name they use to call you to the field, to the whip, to the auction block. But that ain't who you really is." Peggy had waited, barely breathing. "Your true name, the name I give you the day you was born, the name the ancestors know you by, is Afi. It mean born on Friday in my people's tongue. Friday's children is fighters, Chile, survivors, strong-willed and fierce. That's who you is, deep down where they can't reach, Afi." The name had rolled through little Peggy's mind like thunder across distant hills. "But listen good," her mama had continued, her voice dropping even lower. "You can't never say that name out loud, not in front of no white person, not even in front of other slaves, lest you trust 'em with your life. A true name got power, you understand? Power to protect you, but also power they can use against you if they learn it. In the old country, folks believed if your enemy knew your true name, they could bind you, curse you, own your very soul." "Then why tell me?" little Peggy had whispered. Her mama's eyes had filled with tears that never fell. "Because I ain't gonna be here forever, baby. The sickness is in me. I can feel it in my bones. And before I cross over, I got to give you what's yours. Your name, your power. Your proof that you is more than what they say you is." She'd pressed a small cloth bundle into Peggy's hands, a mojo bag filled with roots and red clay from Africa that another slave had brought over years before. "Keep this close. When times get dark, and they will, baby, they surely will, you hold this and you remember you is Afi, daughter of Iodele, granddaughter of Abini, who was a queen's handmaiden in the old land. You got royal blood, Chile. Don't you never forget it." Little Peggy, no, Afi, had clutched that bag and wept silently while her mama hummed an old song in Yoruba, a lullaby from across the ocean that spoke of home and freedom and ancestors watching from beyond the veil. 3 months later, her mama died. Fever took her quick, burning through her body like wildfire through dry grass. They buried her in the slave cemetery without marker or ceremony, just a shallow hole in the red Virginia clay. But before she went, she'd made Afi promise one more thing. "Don't you speak your true name until you free, Chile, or until you ready to claim your power and pay whatever price come with it. A name like yours, it's a key. It unlocks something in you that bondage tries to keep locked down. But once you speak it, once you claim it, ain't no going back. You understand?" Afi had understood, and for 21 years she'd kept that promise, buried that name deep inside where the overseers couldn't whip it out, where the masters couldn't sell it away, where even the auction block couldn't strip it from her. But now, lying in that hot box on the third night with her body broken and her spirit stretched thin as spider silk, she felt something shifting. The ancestors was stirring, child. She could feel them gathering round that iron coffin like a cloud of witnesses, could hear their voices mixing with the night wind. "Speak your name, daughter. Claim your power. The time is coming." Her cracked lips moved, testing the shape of it. Afi. The word felt strange on her tongue after all these years of silence, but it also felt right. Felt like putting on armor forged in the fires of the old country, blessed by the Orishas, sanctified by the blood of her mama and all the ancestors who'd come before. Old folks say that in the Yoruba belief, your name is your destiny. It's a prophecy spoken over you at birth, a map of who you supposed to become. Afi, born on Friday, a fighter, a survivor. And Peggy had survived, hadn't she? Survived the loss of her child, survived the whip, survived these 3 days in hell's own oven. But survival alone wasn't enough anymore. No, child. The rage that had been simmering in her belly since they sold Josiah, since Hawthorne tried to take what wasn't his to take, that rage was transforming into something else, something ancient and terrible and holy. She thought about Mother Bess, the conjure woman, who'd told her once, "Names got power in root work, Chile. The true name of a thing, whether it's a person, a spirit, or a curse, that's how you control it. That's how you bend it to your will." What if, Afi thought, what if I could learn Hawthorne's true name? Not Elias, not Master, but whatever secret name he carried in his rotten soul. What if I could speak his doom into existence, the way my mama spoke my destiny? The idea took root in her mind like a seed in fertile ground. In that moment, lying in the suffocating darkness, Afi made a vow. Not to Jesus, not to the God the white preachers spoke of, but to the old gods her mama had whispered about. To Ogun, god of iron and war. To Oya, goddess of storms and transformation. To Ocean, who knew the ways of love and revenge. To Eshu, keeper of the crossroads where all fates is decided. "I am Afi," she whispered into the darkness, her voice hoarse but steady. "Daughter of Iodele, granddaughter of Abeni. I claim my name. I claim my power. And I swear by the ancestors and the Orishas, by the blood in my veins and the iron in this cage, Elias Hawthorne will pay. He will burn like he's burning me. His name will be cursed. His line will end. And I will be the one to see it done." The air in the hot box seemed to shiver, like the universe itself had heard her and was taking note. Outside, unknown to Afi, something strange was happening. Big Moses, working late at his forge, dropped his hammer with a clang as a chill ran through him despite the heat of the fire. Mother Bess, mixing roots in her cabin, stopped mid-stir as her hands began to tremble. Old Aunt Dinah, praying by candlelight, felt a presence enter the room. Old, powerful, watching. The ancestors had heard. The Orishas had heard. And in the big house, Elias Hawthorne woke from a dream of fire screaming into the night, clutching his chest as his heart raced with a fear he couldn't name. The game had changed, child. The hunted had just become the hunter. And it all started with a name that couldn't be spoken, until it was. By day 27 in that iron coffin, Afi, who the world still called Peggy, had crossed over into a place between living and dying where the veil grows thin and the spirits walk freely among the flesh. Old folks say that suffering opens doors, child. Doors that usually stay locked tight against our mortal eyes. But when you hurt long enough, when the body breaks down and the mind lets go, you start seeing things, hearing things, knowing things that got no earthly explanation. The heat was merciless that day, worse than any before it. The Virginia sun beat down on that iron box like God's own hammer, turning it into a furnace that baked Afi's skin till it cracked and peeled like old bark off a dying tree. Her hair, once thick and beautiful, had begun falling out in clumps. Her lips was split and bleeding. Her eyes, Lord have mercy, her right eye had gone cloudy from the constant exposure to heat and the infection that was setting in. But it was her mind that worried the quarters most. When they brought her the evening water, barely a cupful shoved through the gap, she didn't drink it right away like before. Instead, she laughed, a low, rattling laugh that sent chills down the spine of the young boy who'd brought it. "She done lost her mind," he whispered to Big Moses later. "She laughing in there, brother, laughing like she seen something funny." But Moses, wise beyond his years of bondage, shook his head slow. "Nah, she ain't lost nothing. She found something. The ancestors is talking to her now." And he was right, child. So right it hurt. That night, when the darkness finally brought relief from the cooking sun, Afi's mind broke free from the prison of her body and went wandering. She saw her mama Iodele standing tall and proud in robes of white and gold, reaching out a hand. She saw her boy Josiah, older now, working in some distant Georgia field, but still alive. Still alive. And that knowledge brought her more strength than any meal could. She saw the middle passage, that terrible journey across the ocean of tears, and she felt the rage of 10,000 stolen souls crying out for justice. She saw the auction block in Richmond where they'd sold her baby, and she felt the weight of every chain ever forged for black flesh. But then she saw something else, something that made her sit up straight despite the cramping in her legs, despite the agony in her bones. She saw Big Moses, not the Moses standing outside somewhere in the quarters, but a vision of Moses standing at his forge in the blacksmith shop, the forge where he shaped horseshoes and hinges and iron bars for the plantation. The fire blazed hot and orange, casting shadows that danced on the walls like demons celebrating some unholy rite. And in his massive, scarred hands, he held something small, something that glinted in the firelight. A key. Afi's breath caught in her throat, or what was left of her breath in that suffocating box. She pressed her face to the slit, straining to see into the real world beyond her vision. But all she saw was darkness and the faint glow of distant cabin fires. Was it real? Or was her mind playing tricks, showing her what she wanted to see instead of what was? But then the vision shifted, became clearer, more insistent. She saw Moses testing the key, holding it up to examine the teeth and ridges. She saw him wrap it in a scrap of cloth and tuck it into his leather apron. She saw him glance toward the hot box, his face set with determination and fear in equal measure. He's making a key, she realized, the knowledge hitting her like lightning strike. A key to this devil's cage. The vision faded, and Afi was alone again in the darkness, her heart pounding so hard it hurt. But now she had something she hadn't had before, proof that she wasn't forgotten. Proof that her people, her kin in bondage, was working on her behalf. The question was, why? What was Moses planning? A key to the hot box could mean escape, yes, but escape to where? The patty rollers would hunt her down within a day, and the punishment for running was death, if you was lucky. If you wasn't lucky, they'd make an example of you that would haunt the quarters for generations. No, child. A key alone wasn't enough. There had to be more to the plan. But what? Afi's mind, sharpened now by visions and rage, began to work through the possibilities. If they let her out before the 90 days was up, Hawthorne would just throw her back in, or worse. If they helped her escape, she'd be running blind without supplies, without a guide to the Underground Railroad, without nothing but the clothes on her back. Unless the key wasn't for escape at all. The thought hit her like cold water in the face, bringing clarity to her fevered mind. What if the key was for revenge? What if Moses was making it so that when she got out, when she survived these 90 days and Hawthorne thought he'd broken her, she could use that key herself, use it to turn the tables, to lock the master in his own instrument of torture? The idea was so audacious, so dangerous, that it made her laugh again. That same rattling laugh that had frightened the water boy. But now it was a laugh of understanding, of terrible purpose. Oh, Moses, she thought. You brilliant, crazy man, you given me the tools to cook this devil in his own pot. As if summoned by her thoughts, she heard footsteps approaching the hot box. Heavy ones. Not the light, scared steps of the children who brought water, but the measured tread of someone who knew exactly what they was doing. Sister, came Moses's deep voice, barely above a whisper. You still in there with us? I'm here, Afi croaked, her voice hardly recognizable even to herself. Good, that's real good. There was a pause, then. I need you to listen careful now. Can't talk long before Pritchard comes sniffing around. You understandin' me? I understand. What I'm about to tell you, you got to hold on to it like it's your last breath. You got to believe it even when everything in you wants to give up. Can you do that? Tell me. Moses's voice dropped even lower. So low she had to press her ear against the hot metal to hear. I'm forging something for you. Something that's gonna change everything. But you gotta survive to use it, you hear? You got to hold on. A key, Afi whispered. You making a key. There was shocked silence then. How you know that? The ancestors showed me. They showing me lots of things now, Moses. Things that's coming, things that's gotta be done. Another pause. When Moses spoke again, his voice carried awe mixed with fear. Mother Bess said you was changing in there. Said the suffering was opening you up to power. I didn't believe it till now. Believe it, brother. And believe this too. That key you making? It ain't for my escape, it's for his judgment. When I get out of here, when Hawthorne thinks he won, when he thinks I'm broken and tame, that's when we strike. That's when he goes in this box and I hold the key. She heard Moses sucking his breath sharp. Sister, that's a killing offense. They'll hang you. They'll hang all of us. Maybe, Afi said, her voice steady as stone despite the pain racking her body. Or maybe the ancestors gon' protect us. Maybe the Orisha's gon' open a path. But one thing I know for certain, Elias Hawthorne is gon' pay for what he done. To me, to my child. To all of us. Lord have mercy, Moses breathed. Ain't no mercy in this, brother. This is justice, old justice. The kind that flows from blood spilled on African soil, from bodies thrown overboard in the Middle Passage, from babies sold on auction blocks. This is debt collection, and it's long overdue. For a long moment, there was only the sound of night insects and distant spirituals drifting from the quarters. Then Moses spoke again. His voice changed. Harder, more resolute. All right then, if that's the path the ancestors is showing you, then I'm with you. We all with you. Mother Bess, old Aunt Dinah, young Sarah, even blind Timothy who can't see nothing but knows right from wrong. We all with you. How long till the key's ready? 2 weeks, maybe 3. I got to work slow. Can't let Pritchard or the master see what I'm doing. Gotta forge it at night when they think I'm just fixing broken tools. But I'll have it ready before your 90 days is up. I swear it on my mama's grave. And after, when it's time, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But I got ideas, sister. The Underground Railroad got conductors in the next county. If we time it right, we can get folks out before the paddy rollers even know something happened. But first things first, you got to survive. How you holding up in there? Truth now. Afi considered lying, but what was the point? I'm dying, Moses. Slow but sure. My eyes gone bad. My skin's coming off. My mind's, it's walking between worlds now, but I ain't dead yet. And I ain't gonna die till I see that man suffer like he made me suffer. That's the spirit. That's Afi talking, not Peggy, the strong one. The fighter. Moses's hand slapped the side of the hot box once, a gesture of solidarity. Listen, I got to go for someone sees. But know this, every strike of my hammer from now on, every piece of iron I shape, it's for you, it's for all of us. The key I'm making, it ain't just metal, sister. It's hope forged in fire, it's vengeance hammered into form. When the time comes, it's gonna unlock more than just this box. It's gonna unlock a new future. His footsteps faded away, leaving Afi alone once more in the darkness. But she wasn't really alone, was she? The ancestors was there, pressing close, whispering encouragement. Her mama's spirit wrapped around her like a blanket despite the heat. And somewhere in the quarters, Big Moses was bending iron to their will, forging the tool that would flip the script on slavery itself, at least in this one small, terrible, beautiful way. Afi closed her good eye and let herself drift again, letting the visions come. She saw the key, bright and sharp-toothed, turning in a lock. She saw Hawthorne's face twisted in terror and disbelief as the hot box door clanged shut on him instead of her. She saw flames rising from the big house reflected in the eyes of freed slaves running toward the North Star. And she saw herself, older, scarred, blind in one eye but unbroken, standing under a foreign sky telling this very story to children who'd never known chains. The devil had his hot box. The devil had his whip and his power and his cruelty. But the devil didn't know that God, the real God, not the one the white preachers lied about, had given Big Moses the gift of ironwork. And iron, child. Iron could be shaped into keys just as easy as it could be shaped into chains. The only question was who would wield it. The answer was coming. Oh yes, 27 days down, 63 to go, and every single one of them bringing Elias Hawthorne closer to his reckoning. Listen here, child, 'cause this part of the story cuts so deep it still bleeds after all these years. This here's about the worst thing that can happen to a mama, having her baby ripped from her arms and sold away like he wasn't nothing but a sack of flour or a lame horse. And if you think that hot box was hell, well, let me tell you. There's hells that burn hotter than any iron cage, and they burn on the inside where no water can reach, where no key can unlock the pain. It was 3 years before that terrible night Hawthorne came to her cabin. 3 years before the hot box. Back in 1844, when the cotton market was booming and white men's greed ran higher than the Rappahannock River after spring rains. Afi, still going by Peggy then, her true name buried deep, had a son. His name was Josiah. Sweet Jesus, that boy was beautiful. 6 years old, with eyes bright as morning stars and a smile that could make even the hardest field hand forget their troubles for a moment. His skin was smooth brown, unmarked by the whip, and his laugh, Lord have mercy. His laugh was like water over stones, pure and clear and full of an innocence that had no business existing in a place like Hawthorne Plantation. Afi loved that child more than her own life. Every morning before the overseer's bell, she'd hold him close, breathing in the smell of him, that mix of wood smoke and child sweat and something indefinable that was just Josiah. She'd whisper stories to him about Africa, about his grandmama Iodel who'd survived the Middle Passage, about ancestors who was kings and queens before the white men came with their chains and lies. "Mama," he'd ask in his small voice, "we ever gonna be free?" And she'd lie, Lord forgive her, she'd lie and say, "Yes, baby, one day. One day we gon' see that North Star up close and walk on free soil." But freedom was a dream that died hard on Hawthorne Plantation, and dreams don't fill bellies or stop whips from falling. The trouble started when Elias Hawthorne fell into debt. Word spread through the quarters like wildfire. The master had gambled heavy in Richmond, lost big to some northern investors, and now the bank was breathing down his neck like the devil collecting souls. When white men get desperate, child, black folks suffer. That's a truth old as bondage itself. Hawthorne called in a slave trader, a vile creature named Cyrus Blackwell who traveled the South with chains and ledgers, buying and selling human flesh like it was his birthright. Blackwell came to the plantation in a wagon pulled by 2 horses, his clothes fine but his eyes dead as a snake's, and started evaluating the slaves like they was livestock at market. He walked through the quarters, pointing at this one and that one, writing numbers in his book. Strong-backed men for the deep South cotton fields, young women for housework or worse, and children, oh God, the children. Children to be trained up proper on other plantations where they'd never see their mamas again. When Blackwell's eyes landed on Josiah, Afi felt her blood turn to ice. "That one," he said, pointing with a finger thick as a tobacco plug. "How old?" "6, Hawthorne answered, his voice flat, uncaring. "Strong for his age. Smart, too, learns quick. He'll fetch a good price in the Georgia market. Rice plantations always need young ones to work the low country. Their small hands can—" "No!" Afi's voice rang out before she could stop herself. She dropped the cotton sack she'd been holding and ran toward them, her heart pounding like African drums in her chest. "No, please, massa. Not my boy. Please, I'll work harder, I'll—" Pritchard, the overseer, stepped forward and backhanded her across the face so hard she tasted blood. "Shut your mouth, gal. You don't speak less spoken to. But a mama's love don't follow no rules, child. It don't bow to no overseer or master." Afi got back up, blood dripping from her split lip, and threw herself at Hawthorne's feet. "Massa, please, he's all I got. Please don't take my baby, I'm begging you." Hawthorne looked down at her like she was something he'd scraped off his boot. "You got nothing, Peggy. You don't own that boy. I do. And I'll do with my property as I see fit. Now get back to work, for I have Pritchard whip some sense into you." "I'll run!" Afi screamed, past caring about consequences. "You take my boy, I'll run. I swear to God." That's when Hawthorne's face went cold. "Pritchard, take her to the whipping post, 39 lashes. And make sure the boy watches. Teach 'em both a lesson about knowing their place." They dragged her to that post, that devil's pillar standing in the center of the yard where so much black blood had watered the Virginia soil. They stripped her to the waist and tied her wrists above her head. Little Josiah screamed and cried. held back by two field hands who had tears running down their own faces but couldn't help, couldn't interfere. The first strike of the whip set her back on fire. The second made her see stars. By the 10th, she'd stopped screaming and started praying. Not to the white man's Jesus, but to Oya, warrior goddess, to Ogun, lord of iron and vengeance, to every ancestor who'd suffered and survived. Josiah's cries faded in and out of her consciousness. "Mama! Mama, stop hurting her, please!" 39 lashes, the number prescribed by law to keep from killing a slave outright, but enough to break the spirit, to mark the flesh, to teach submission. When they finally cut her down, Afi collapsed in the dirt, her back a ruin of blood and torn flesh, barely conscious. The next day, they came for Josiah. Afi, fevered and weak from the whipping, tried to get up from her pallet, but her body wouldn't obey. She could only watch through the cabin door as Blackwell loaded her boy into the wagon with 6 other children, all crying for their mamas. "Mama!" Josiah's voice cut through the morning air like a knife. "Mama, where they taking me?" She crawled. Lord have mercy, she crawled on her belly like a snake out of that cabin, leaving a trail of blood behind her, and made it as far as the edge of the yard before her strength gave out. "Josiah!" she screamed with what little voice she had left. "Josiah, baby, I love you. You hear me? I love you. Mama loves you." The wagon pulled away, dust rising in its wake, and the last thing she saw was her boy's face pressed against the slats, his small hand reaching through, reaching for her like he could somehow pull himself back by will alone. Then he was gone. Just gone. Swallowed up by distance and the cruelty of men who saw profit where God saw souls. Afi lay in that dirt for hours, her ruined back burning in the sun, her throat raw from screaming, her heart torn to pieces. The other slaves eventually carried her back to the cabin, and Mother Bess tended her wounds with yarrow and comfrey. But some wounds don't heal, child. Some wounds stay open and bleeding forever. In the weeks that followed, Afi tried to find out where they'd taken him. She asked every traveling slave, every preacher, every conductor on the Underground Railroad who passed through. But Josiah had vanished into the vastness of the South like a drop of water in the ocean. Georgia, someone said, or maybe Alabama, or Louisiana. Nobody knew for certain. That's when something inside her died. Or maybe it didn't die. Maybe it transformed, the way grief sometimes hardens into rage, the way pain can forge a soul into steel. She stopped smiling, stopped singing the spirituals, started keeping to herself, watching Hawthorne with eyes that promised retribution even if her mouth stayed silent. She made a vow in the darkness of her cabin, whispering it to the ancestors. "I will survive, and one day, somehow, I will make him pay for what he took from me. If it takes 10 years, if it takes my life, I will see justice done." 3 years later, when Hawthorne came to her cabin with lust in his eyes and entitlement in his step, that vow came roaring back. When he tried to take what wasn't his, she fought not just for herself, but for Josiah, for every stolen child, for every mama who'd screamed herself hoarse watching her baby disappear down a dusty road. And now, lying in this hot box on day 32, feeling her body breaking down piece by piece, she held on to that memory. Not as torture, but as fuel. Every breath she drew was for Josiah. Every hour she survived was a middle finger to the man who'd destroyed her world. The rage that had been simmering since that terrible day 3 years ago was now an inferno, and it would burn everything in its path. Starting with Elias Hawthorne. "Hold on, baby," she thought, sending the prayer out into the universe. "Wherever you is, whatever plantation ground you standing on, hold on. Mama's coming, maybe not in body, but in spirit. And I'm gonna settle the debt they owe us. I swear it on my true name, on my blood, on the ancestors who watch from beyond. I swear it." Outside the hot box, the quarters grew quiet as evening fell, and somewhere far away, maybe in Georgia, maybe further, a young boy named Josiah looked up at the stars and wondered if his mama was still alive, still thinking of him. She was, child. Oh, she was. and she was planning a vengeance that would shake the very foundations of that cursed plantation. Now you see, people, death ain't always what the white folks think it is. They believe when your heart stops beating, when your breath goes still, that's the end. Just darkness and nothing more. But us folks who survived the Middle Passage, who carried Africa in our souls despite the chains, we know different. We know that sometimes you got to die to be reborn. Sometimes the spirit has to leave the body, walk with the ancestors, and then come back changed, transformed, ready for what's coming. That's what happened to Afi on day 44 in that devil's oven they called the hot box. By then, child, she'd lost track of time in any meaningful way. The days blurred together into an endless cycle of unendurable heat, brief respites at night, and the tiny amounts of water and hardtack they shoved through the gap to keep her barely alive. Her body was a ruin, skin peeling off in sheets like old wallpaper, her right eye completely blind now from infection, her hair gone, her muscles cramped into permanent knots from being unable to stretch. But it was her mind that concerned the quarters most. When they brought water that morning, she didn't respond, didn't move, didn't even moan the way she usually did. "She dead," whispered the young girl who'd brought the cup, her voice trembling with fear and grief. Lord Jesus, she finally dead. But Mother Bess, standing nearby with a bundle of herbs wrapped in cloth, shook her head slow. "No, child, she ain't dead. She crossing over, but she ain't dead. There's a difference." Inside that iron coffin, Afi had indeed stopped breathing in the way the living breathe. Her heart had slowed to barely a flutter. Her body, exhausted beyond all endurance, had finally given up the fight. But her spirit, her spirit was wide awake and walking in places the flesh couldn't follow. She found herself standing in a place that was neither the hot box nor the plantation, but somewhere in between. The sky above was the color of smoke, and beneath her feet was red clay, the same red Virginia clay that stained everything on Hawthorne's land. But here it was alive, pulsing with memory and power. Before her stood figures made of light and shadow, forms she recognized not with her eyes but with her soul. Her mama, Ayodele, dressed in the white robes of the ancestors, smiled with a sadness that spoke of understanding. Beside her stood an older woman Afi had never met in life but knew instantly. Her grandmother, Abeni, who'd been a queen's handmaiden in the Yoruba kingdom before the slavers came. And there were others, hundreds, maybe thousands, stretching back into the smoky distance. All the souls stolen from Africa, all the bodies thrown overboard during the Middle Passage, all the children sold away from their mothers, all the men and women worked to death in cotton fields and rice paddies. They stood silent, watching, waiting. "Mama." Afi's voice came out strong here, not the hoarse croak it had become in the box. "Am I dead?" Ayodele stepped forward, her hand reaching out to touch Afi's face with infinite gentleness. "Not yet, my daughter, but you standing on the threshold. You can cross over if you want. Join us in peace. Leave the suffering behind. Nobody would blame you. You endured more than most could bear." Afi looked at the gathered souls, felt the pull of rest, of release from pain. How easy it would be to just let go, to slip into that peaceful darkness and never feel the heat again, never taste the bitterness of bondage, never carry the weight of Josiah's absence. But then she remembered Hawthorne's face when he threw her in the box, remembered his words. 90 days to think about your place. Remembered the promise she'd made to the Orishas, to herself, to every mama who'd lost a child to the auction block. "No," she said, her voice growing stronger. "I ain't finished yet. I got work to do on that plantation." Abeni, the grandmother, spoke for the first time, her voice like distant thunder. "The work you speak of is dangerous, child. It will cost you more than you know. Blood calls for blood, and vengeance has a price that must be paid." "I know," Afi said, "but so does slavery. So does what they done to us. How many more mamas got to watch their babies sold? How many more backs got to bleed under the whip? Somebody got to stand up, somebody got to say enough." The assembled ancestors murmured among themselves, a sound like wind through dead leaves. Then another figure stepped forward, and Afi's breath caught. This one was different, not dressed in white but in red and black, with iron bands on her wrists and a machete at her side. Her face was fierce, beautiful, terrible. "Oya?" Afi whispered, recognizing the warrior goddess, the one her mama had told her about, the deity who ruled over storms, cemeteries, and transformation. "You called on me when you was put in that box," Oya said, her voice like the crack of lightning. "You invoked the old powers, spoke your true name, made vows that can't be unmade. And I heard you, daughter of Iodel. Will you help me?" Afi asked, though she was trembling now, not with fear but with the power emanating from the goddess. "I don't help," Oya said, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "I transform. I destroy so that new things can be born. If you walk my path, you'll be changed. The woman who goes back into that body won't be the same one who left it. You'll carry power, yes, but also burden. You'll serve justice, but also chaos. You understand?" "I understand." Oya reached out and pressed a finger to Afi's forehead, right between her eyes where the third eye is said to rest. The touch burned like a brand, and Afi screamed, a sound that echoed across the spirit realm and back into the physical world where her body lay motionless in the hot box. "Then go back," Oya commanded. "Go back and do what must be done. But remember, you don't walk alone. We walk with you. The ancestors walk with you. And when the time comes for the final reckoning, we will be there." The world spun, and Afi felt herself being pulled backward, away from the spirits, away from the peace of death, back toward the suffocating heat and pain of her broken body. "Wait," she called out. How will I know what to do?" Iodel's voice reached her, faint but clear. "Trust the root workers, trust Big Moses, and trust the power that's been planted in you. When the moment comes, you'll know." Then she was back, gasping, choking, her body convulsing as breath flooded back into her lungs. The pain hit like a hammer, worse than before if that was possible, because now she was hyper-aware of every broken part, every damaged cell. But she was alive and changed. Outside, Mother Bess heard the gasp and knew immediately what had happened. She approached the hot box with her bundle of herbs and began speaking in a low, urgent voice. "Afi? That your true name, ain't it? I seen it in a vision last night. You hear me, Afi?" "I hear you," came the ragged reply. "Good. Listen close now. I got something for you. Something powerful." Mother Bess knelt by the slits and began pushing items through. Roots wrapped in cloth, small bones, a vial of liquid that glowed faintly even in daylight. "This here's High John the Conqueror root. Strongest one I got. Put it under your tongue when the time comes. This," she pushed through a small cloth bag, "is gopher dust mixed with sulfur and graveyard dirt. When you ready to work conjure on your enemy, you sprinkle this where he walks. And this," the glowing vial, "is water from the river at midnight, blessed by the old gods. One drop on the lips of a sleeping man, and he'll tell you his deepest secrets, even his true name." Afi's fingers, clumsy and weak, gathered these precious items, hiding them in the corners of the box where they wouldn't be found during the daily water delivery. "Why?" she whispered. "Why you helping me like this?" Mother Bess was quiet for a moment then. "Because I'm tired, Chile. I'm 72 years old, been a slave since I was 5. I seen things that would break a weaker soul. Children sold, women violated, men lynched for looking at white folks wrong. I tried to fight with prayers and herbs, tried to protect our people the best I could. But prayer alone ain't enough, not against evil this deep." She paused, her voice dropping to barely a whisper. "You was chosen, Afi. The ancestors chose you. Oya herself touched you. I can feel her mark on you even through this iron. You, the instrument of justice now. You, the blade that's gon' cut through the darkness." "I'm scared," Afi admitted. "Good. Fear keeps you sharp. But don't let it stop you. When you get out of this box, and you will get out, I seen it, you gon' have a choice. Submit or resist. Choose resistance, daughter. Choose vengeance, choose transformation. "He gon' burn," Affy said, her voice suddenly clear and strong despite her ruined throat. "I promise you, Mother Bess, Elias Hawthorne gon' cook in this box just like he tried to cook me. And when he's screaming for mercy, I'm gon' remember every child sold, every back whipped, every spirit broken on this plantation. I'm gon' remember, and I'm gon' show him the same mercy he showed us." "Which is none," Mother Bess said with grim satisfaction. "Which is none." The old root woman stood, her joints cracking, and placed one hand flat against the hot metal of the box. "Then survive, daughter. 44 days down, 46 to go. You done died and come back. Now all you gotta do is endure a little longer and then—" She smiled, showing gaps where teeth used to be. "Then we gon' show these white folks what happens when you push the ancestors chosen too far." As Mother Bess walked away, Affy clutched the sacred items to her chest and closed her one good eye. She could still feel Oya's finger burning between her brows, could still hear the whispers of the ancestors promising support. She had died on day 44, but the woman who came back wasn't Peggy the slave anymore. She was Affy the transformed, Affy the chosen, Affy who would not break, would not bow, would not forgive. And God help anyone who stood in her way. In them days of deep sorrow, when 90 suns had risen and set over that iron tomb, when the Virginia summer had turned to early autumn, and the cotton was picked, and the leaves was starting to turn gold on the edges, that's when Elias Hawthorne decided it was time to open the hot box and see what remained of the woman he'd put inside. He expected a corpse. Lord have mercy. He fully expected to find nothing but bones and rotted flesh, maybe some dried leather that used to be skin. That's what happened most times when someone stayed in that devil's cage more than 30 days. But Hawthorne was a proud man, a stubborn man, and he'd said 90 days, so 90 days it would be, even if it meant burying what was left. The whole plantation gathered that morning, called in from the fields by Pritchard's bellowing voice. The overseer was grinning like the devil at a sinner's funeral, his yellow teeth showing through his tobacco-stained beard. He'd enjoyed every day of Peggy's suffering, had made jokes about it to the other white men who visited the plantation, even took bets on whether she'd survive. "Today's the day, boys," he hollered to the assembled slaves. "Today we see what happens to uppity niggers who forget their place. Gather round now. This here's a lesson you all need to witness." The quarters came slow, reluctant, their faces masks of grief and barely contained rage. Big Moses stood at the front, his massive frame tense, his fists clenched so tight his knuckles had gone pale. Mother Bess leaned on a walking stick, her old eyes sharp and knowing. Old Aunt Dinah wept silently, her face turned toward the hot box like she was bearing witness to a crucifixion. Hawthorne arrived on his horse, dressed fine in a gray suit despite the heat, his face flushed with bourbon and anticipation. He dismounted with the careful dignity of a drunk man pretending sobriety and approached the hot box like a king approaching a defeated enemy. 90 days, he announced to the crowd, his voice carrying across the yard. 90 days I gave her to think about her sins, to contemplate her defiance, to learn submission. He turned to Pritchard. "Open it." The overseer pulled out his ring of keys, that jangling symbol of authority that haunted every slave's nightmares, and selected the one for the hot box. The lock was rusty from months of weather, and it took him 3 tries to get the key to turn. When it finally clicked open, the sound echoed like a gunshot in the silence. Pritchard grabbed the iron door with both hands and heaved it open. The hinges screamed in protest, and a wave of putrid air rolled out. The smell of human waste, infection, death, and something else, something ancient and powerful that made even Pritchard step back involuntarily. For a moment, nobody could see inside. The darkness was too complete, too absolute. Then something moved. A hand emerged first, skeletal, the skin hanging loose like a glove 2 sizes too big, covered in sores and scabs. Then an arm, then a shoulder. And then Affy pulled herself out of that iron coffin and stood. Sweet Jesus, child. The sight of her made strong men gasp and women cry out. She looked like something risen from the grave, like death itself had decided to walk among the living. Her body was wasted to bone and sinew, every rib visible, her legs barely able to support her weight. Her right eye was filmed over, blind and weeping pus. Her hair was completely gone, her scalp covered in burns and infection. Her skin, what remained of it, was a patchwork of raw flesh, scabs and new skin grown pink and tender. But she was standing. Lord have mercy, she was standing. And more than that, she was smiling. Not a friendly smile, not a submissive smile, but something else entirely. Something that made Hawthorne's self-satisfied expression falter. Something that made Pritchard reach for the whip at his belt out of pure instinct. It was the smile of someone who'd died and come back. The smile of someone who'd walked with the ancestors and learned secrets the living wasn't meant to know. The smile of someone who'd made promises to gods older than Christianity and meant to keep every single one. The assembled slaves stood frozen, caught between horror at her condition and awe at her survival. Big Moses's eyes widened as he recognized something in her bearing, the mark of transformation, the touch of the divine. Mother Bess nodded slowly, a grim satisfaction on her weathered face. Hawthorne recovered first, his face hardening back into its usual mask of cruelty. "Well, well," he drawled, circling her like a vulture around carrion. "You survived. I'll admit, I'm impressed. Most don't last 30 days, but you're tougher than I gave you credit for." Afi didn't respond, didn't even look at him. She kept her one good eye fixed on the horizon, like she could see something beyond the plantation, beyond Virginia, beyond this world entirely. "You learned your lesson, girl," Hawthorne pressed, his voice dropping to that dangerous quiet that preceded violence. "You understand now who's master here? You ready to submit?" Finally, Afi turned to look at him. Her blind eye wept, but her good eye was clear, sharp, burning with an intensity that made him take an involuntary step backward. "Yes, massa," she said, her voice ruined little more than a harsh whisper. "I learned." "Good." Hawthorne straightened his jacket, satisfaction returning to his features. "Then get yourself cleaned up and report to the big house. You'll work as my personal servant now, where I can keep an eye on you. Consider it a mercy. Housework's easier than the fields." "Yes, massa," Afi repeated, still with that smile playing at her cracked lips. Hawthorne turned to address the crowd. "Let this be a lesson to all of you. Disobedience has consequences. Defiance will be punished. But," and here he gestured magnanimously at Afi's wasted form, "even the worst sinner can be redeemed through proper correction. Now get back to work, all of you." The slaves dispersed slowly, many throwing glances back at Afi, some with pity, others with something that looked like hope, others with fear at what she'd become. But Afi stood still as a statue, not moving until the yard had cleared except for Pritchard and a few house servants. As Pritchard moved to herd her toward the big house, Big Moses managed to catch her eye for just a moment. He touched his chest over his heart, a signal, and then patted his pocket. The key. He had the key finished and hidden. Mother Bess, passing by with a water bucket, whispered without looking at her, "The roots is in your cabin. Use them when the time come." And old Aunt Dinah, rushing forward despite her age to support Afi's trembling frame, pressed something into her hand. A small cloth bundle that felt like dried herbs and something hard, maybe bone. Afi let them lead her away, her body weak, but her spirit stronger than it had ever been. As they walked past Hawthorne, she stumbled, deliberately, and had to catch herself on his arm. "Careful there," he said, not unkindly now that he thought her broken. "You'll need your strength for your new duties." Afi looked up at him, and for just a second let him see what burned behind her remaining eye. "Oh, I got strength, massa," she whispered, so low only he could hear. "More than you know. Thank you for the lesson, Sinho. Thank you for teaching me what I needed to learn." Something in her tone made his smile freeze. "What did you say?" But Afi had already looked away, letting Aunt Dinah guide her toward the big house, leaving Hawthorne standing in the yard with a strange chill running down his spine despite the afternoon heat. That night, as she lay on a pallet in the servants' quarters off the big house kitchen, being tended by Aunt Dinah, who wept as she cleaned the worst of the sores, Afi stared at the ceiling with her one good eye and made an inventory of everything she'd gained in that iron tomb. She'd gained endurance, the knowledge that she could survive anything. She'd gained the blessing of Oya and the ancestors. She'd gained the respect and support of the quarters, who now looked at her not as broken Peggy, but as something else, something powerful. She'd gained access to the big house, to Hawthorne's private spaces, to his food and drink and unguarded moments. And most importantly, she'd gained time. Time to heal enough to execute the plan. Time to gather the tools Mother Bess had prepared. Time to coordinate with Big Moses and the others who'd sworn to help. "How you feeling, baby?" Aunt Dinah asked, her voice thick with tears. Afi turned her head slowly, that terrible smile returning. "I'm feeling grateful, Auntie. Massa Hawthorne gave me a gift in that box. He gave me 90 days to think, 90 days to plan, 90 days to die and be reborn. What you gonna do? What needs doing? What should have been done long ago?" Afi's hand went to the small bundle Aunt Dinah had pressed into her palm earlier, high John root and a piece of bone carved with symbols. "He wanted to break me. Instead, he made me into exactly what the ancestors needed, a weapon." Outside, thunder rumbled across the Virginia sky, and in the distance, lightning flickered like the fire of judgment itself. Elias Hawthorne, lying in his comfortable bed in the big house, couldn't sleep that night. He kept seeing that smile, kept hearing her whispered thanks, kept feeling like he'd made a terrible mistake. But it was too late for second thoughts. The door had been opened, death had stepped out, and now it was walking through his house, waiting, patient as a cottonmouth in tall grass, for exactly the right moment to strike. 46 days remained until that moment came. 46 days for Afi to heal, to prepare, to gather her strength. And when those days was done, sweet Jesus, when those days was done, Virginia was going to witness something that would be whispered about in slave quarters from Maryland to Mississippi. Justice. Ancient, terrible, and absolutely earned. Now you see, folks, there's a particular kind of danger that comes from being underestimated. White folks always made that mistake with us. Thought because they broke our backs, they'd broken our spirits. Thought because they controlled our bodies, they controlled our minds. But the truth is, child, some of the most dangerous people in this world is the ones everybody thinks is broken. They the ones who can move through spaces unseen, who can listen without being noticed, who can learn the secrets that pride and arrogance leave lying around like loaded guns. Afi, still called Peggy by everyone except the few who knew her true name, spent her first 3 days in the big house mostly sleeping and healing under Aunt Dinah's care. The old woman brought yarrow tea to fight infection, comfrey poultices for the burns, and whispered prayers in African tongues that the white folks didn't understand. Mother Bess came too, sneaking in through the kitchen after dark with more powerful medicine. Roots wrapped in red cloth, oils that smelled of earth and mystery, and instructions whispered so quiet they was barely breath. "When you strong enough to stand without shaking," Mother Bess said on the third night, pressing a small vial into Afi's palm. "You put 3 drops of this in his evening whiskey. It won't kill him, not yet. But it'll make him weak, make him sleep heavy, make his body start failing him slow. White doctors will think it's consumption or the fever. They won't suspect nothing." Afi held the vial up to the candlelight, watching the liquid inside catch the flame and glow like amber. "What is it?" "Foxglove, mostly, mixed with other things I learned from my grandmother who learned from hers. It's old poison, child. Old as Africa, old as slavery itself. Been passing down through the quarters for generations, waiting for the right moment, the right person." Mother Bess's eyes glittered in the darkness. "You that person now. The ancestors chose you." "He gon' suffer?" Afi asked, and there was no mercy in her voice, no hesitation. "He gon' suffer," Mother Bess confirmed with grim satisfaction. "But slow, understand? Can't rush this. You gotta be patient. Let it build up in his body over weeks. By the time we're ready to move on him, he'll be weak as a newborn, barely able to stand, perfect for what's coming." On the 4th morning, Hawthorne's wife, Mistress Caroline, A thin woman with a pinched face who'd never shown Affie anything but cold indifference summoned her to the parlor. "Peggy," she said, not looking up from her embroidery, "you'll be working as a house servant now. Your duties will include serving meals, cleaning the master's study and bedroom, maintaining the fires, and attending to Master Hawthorne's personal needs. You'll sleep in the servants' quarters off the kitchen. You'll speak only when spoken to. You will never, under any circumstances, make eye contact with white visitors. Do you understand?" "Yes, mistress," Affie said, her voice still hoarse but growing stronger each day. She kept her one good eye lowered, playing the role of the broken, submissive slave. "Good. Martha will show you your duties. And Peggy?" Mistress Caroline finally looked up, her gaze cold as January ice. "If you cause any trouble, any at all, you'll find yourself back in that box, am I clear?" "Yes, mistress." But as Affie turned to leave, she allowed herself the smallest smile where the white woman couldn't see it. "You think the box broke me," she thought. "You got no idea what it made me into." Martha, the head house servant, an older black woman who'd been with the Hawthornes for 30 years, took Affie through the big house, explaining each task with the weary patience of someone who'd trained too many replacements to count. But when they reached the master's study, Martha paused and lowered her voice. "You survived something that kills most folk," she said quietly. "I don't know if you brave or crazy or blessed, but I know this. You here now in the heart of the beast. You got access to things field hands never see. Food, drink, private spaces, keys." She met Affie's eye meaningfully. "You understand what I'm saying?" "I understand," Affie replied. "Good. 'Cause some of us been waiting a long time for someone strong enough to do what needs doing. You need anything at all, you let me know. There's more friends in this house than you might think." Over the following days, Affie learned the rhythms of the big house like a hunter learning the habits of prey. She learned that Hawthorne took his bourbon at precisely 6 o'clock each evening in his study, alone, while he reviewed the plantation ledgers. She learned that he slept heavy after that bourbon, often not stirring until past midnight when he'd wake and stumble to the privy. She learned where he kept his keys, his money, his important papers. She learned the layout of every room, every window, every door. And she learned his routines, his preferences, his weaknesses. On the 7th night of her service, when she brought his evening bourbon on a silver tray, another cruel irony, serving her tormentor like she was grateful for the privilege, Hawthorne was in an expansive mood. The cotton had sold well, his debts was being paid down, and he felt like a king surveying his kingdom. "Peggy," he said, gesturing for her to set the tray on his desk. "I hear you're doing well with your new duties. Martha speaks highly of your work." "Thank you, Massa," Affie said, keeping her eyes down. "You understand now, don't you, about obedience, about knowing your place?" He leaned back in his leather chair, swirling the bourbon in his glass. "That time in the box, it was for your own good, to teach you, to make you useful." Every word was a knife, but Affie kept her face neutral, submissive. "Yes, Massa, I learned my lesson." Good, good. He took a long drink, not noticing how her hand had trembled slightly as she'd poured it, not noticing the 3 tiny drops of Mother Bess's poison that now mixed with the amber liquid. "You may go." Affie curtsied, another degradation, another small death of dignity, and left the study. But once the door closed behind her, she allowed herself to breathe, to let the rage burning in her belly flicker bright for just a moment before banking it down again. One drop closer, she thought. One day closer. Martha was waiting in the hallway, her eyes questioning. Affie gave the smallest nod, and the older woman's face transformed with fierce satisfaction. Over the next 3 weeks, the routine became sacred. Every evening at 6 o'clock, Affie brought the bourbon. Every evening, 3 drops went into the glass, and every evening Hawthorne drank it down without suspicion, sometimes even complimenting her on her service. And slowly, so slowly that he didn't notice at first, things began to change. He started sleeping heavier later. His appetite decreased. He complained to his wife about feeling tired, about a persistent cough, about pains in his chest. The white doctor was called, examined him, and pronounced it nothing serious. Probably just age and stress. Prescribed rest and fresh air. But it wasn't age. It wasn't stress. It was Africa's revenge, delivered 3 drops at a time by a one-eyed woman who'd survived 90 days in hell and come back with a purpose. By the 4th week, Hawthorne had lost weight. His hands shook sometimes. His temper, always short, became explosive. He'd rage at servants for tiny mistakes, then forget what he was angry about mid-sentence. "He's failing," Martha whispered to Afi one night in the kitchen. "You can see it in his eyes. That poison's working its way deep into his blood." "Not fast enough," Afi said, though inside she was thrumming with satisfaction. Every cough, every tremor, every moment of weakness she witnessed was a small payment on the debt he owed. But the final reckoning was still to come. Late one night, unable to sleep, Afi sat in the servants' quarters staring at her reflection in a polished pot, the only mirror she had access to. The face that looked back was hardly recognizable as the woman who'd entered the hot box. She was thinner, harder, marked forever by what she'd endured. Her blind eye wept constantly. Her skin was scarred in patterns that looked almost like ritual markings. But her remaining eye burned with purpose. Big Moses visited the kitchen the next morning on the pretext of fixing a broken hinge and managed a moment alone with Afi. "The key's ready," he whispered while hammering. "Hidden in my forge. When you need it, just say the word and I'll get it to you." "Not yet," Afi replied, stirring a pot on the stove. "He needs to be weaker, barely able to stand. That way when the time comes, he won't be able to fight." "How much longer?" 2 weeks, maybe 3, then..." She looked at him with her fierce, one-eyed gaze. "Then we show him what justice looks like." Moses nodded, his face grim with understanding and determination. "The quarters is ready. When you move, we all move. They can't hang all of us." "They might try," Afi said quietly. "Then we die free," Moses replied. "Better than dying in chains." That night, serving Hawthorne his poisoned bourbon as usual, Afi allowed herself to really look at him for the first time in weeks. The man who'd thrown her in that box, who'd sold her child, who'd ruled the plantation like a tyrant. He looked diminished now, smaller. His face was gaunt, his eyes sunken, his hands trembling as he reached for the glass. He didn't look like a master anymore. He looked like prey. And as Afi left his study, she felt something shift inside her, the final piece of the plan clicking into place. The poison was weakening his body. The key was ready to lock him away. The quarters were prepared to move when she gave the signal. All that remained was choosing the perfect moment. The moment when the moon was right, when the ancestors was watching, when justice could finally be served. Soon, she thought. Very soon now. And somewhere in the spirit realm, Oya smiled, her warrior's heart satisfied that her chosen instrument was ready. The storm was building, the transformation was nearly complete. And when it broke over Hawthorne Plantation, nothing would ever be the same again. Old folks say that sometimes the devil comes disguised as desire, and sometimes justice comes disguised as submission. What I'm about to tell you now, child, it's the hardest part of this story to speak aloud. The part where a woman had to use the very thing that was meant to destroy her as a weapon against her destroyer. This ain't no tale of love, understand? This is strategy, this is war. This is survival dressed up in seduction's clothes. 6 weeks had passed since Afi emerged from that iron coffin. 6 weeks of poisoning Hawthorne's bourbon 3 drops at a time. 6 weeks of watching him deteriorate. His hands shaken worse, his cough deeper, his sleep heavier. The white doctor had been called twice more, each time leaving with a puzzled expression and useless tonics that did nothing but line his pockets. But Afi knew the poison alone wasn't enough. Mother Bess had warned her. The body can sometimes fight back, build resistance. You need to deliver the final dose different, direct, powerful, unmistakable. And you need to do it when he's most vulnerable, most unguarded. The opportunity came on a Thursday night in late October. Mistress Caroline had taken the carriage to visit her sister in Richmond, wouldn't be back for 3 days. The big house was quiet except for Hawthorne in his study, going through ledgers by lamplight, a bottle of bourbon at his elbow, already half empty though it was only 9 o'clock. Martha found Afi in the kitchen, cleaning the supper dishes, and spoke low and urgent. Tonight. It's got to be tonight. He's alone, he's drunk, and the mistress is gone. Mother Bess sent word. She says the moon is right, the ancestors is watching, and if you don't move now, you might not get another chance this perfect. Afi's hand stilled in the wash basin. Her heart, which had survived 90 days of hell, began to pound like African drums in her chest. What do I have to do? Martha pulled a small clay vial from her apron pocket, different from the one Mother Bess had given before. This one was sealed with wax and marked with symbols scratched into the clay. This is the final dose, concentrated. Enough to drop a horse if you gave it all at once, but you ain't gonna give it all at once. How then? Martha's face was grim. You gotta get close to him, child, real close. Close enough to... She paused, choosing her words careful. Close enough to put it on your lips and transfer it with a kiss. Afi's stomach turned. You asking me to... I'm asking you to do what needs doing, Martha interrupted, her voice hard. I know what he tried to do to you, what he's done to so many of our sisters. I know this ask is heavy as iron chains, but this is how we win, Afi. This is how we turn their own wickedness against them. You use what they think is power, our bodies, our submission, and you make it poison. For a long moment, Afi stood silent, her mind racing back to that night 3 months ago when Hawthorne had come to her cabin with lust and entitlement in his eyes, remembered fighting him, refusing him, being thrown into that box for daring to say no. And now Martha was asking her to do the opposite, to go to him willingly, to seduce, to kiss. The rage in her belly flared hot and bright. But then she thought of Josiah, sold away and lost. Thought of every woman in every quarter who'd been violated by masters who thought black bodies was theirs for the taking. Thought of the ancestors watching, waiting to see if she had the strength to do what was necessary. Give me the vial, she said finally. Martha pressed it into her palm. Put half of it on your lips, no more or you'll poison yourself too. When you kiss him, make sure it gets in his mouth, on his tongue. It'll work fast once it's in his system, direct like that. He'll get dizzy, weak, probably pass out within the hour. That's when you and Big Moses move him. Afi nodded, her jaw set with determination. She went to the servant's privy and opened the vial with trembling hands. The liquid inside was thick, dark as blood, and smelled of earth and bitter roots. She dipped her finger in it and touched it to her lips. Just a small amount, carefully measured, then sealed the vial and tucked it into her bodice. When she looked at her reflection in the water bucket, the face staring back was a stranger's. A woman who'd been broken and reforged, a warrior wearing a servant's dress. She found Hawthorne slumped in his chair, the ledgers forgotten, the bourbon bottle nearly empty. His eyes were unfocused, his breathing heavy. The poison had weakened him more than she'd realized. He looked like a ghost of the man who'd ruled this plantation with an iron fist. "Massa?" she said softly from the doorway. He looked up, squinting to focus. "Peggy? What you want?" She stepped into the room, moving slow, deliberate. "I came to see if you needed anything, Massa. It's late. You should rest." "I'm fine," he slurred. But even as he said it, he reached for the bourbon and nearly knocked the glass over. "Damn hands won't stop shaking. Doctor says it's nothing, but..." "Let me help you to bed, Massa," Afi said, moving closer. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought he must be able to hear it. But she kept her voice steady, submissive. "You need your rest." Hawthorne looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in weeks. Saw the ruined eye, the scarred skin, but also saw something else. Saw a woman standing close, offering help, her remaining eye downcast and respectful. The bourbon and the poison had lowered his defenses, dulled his judgment. He saw what he wanted to see: submission, obedience, maybe even gratitude. "You're a good girl, Peggy," he said. his words slurring together. "I knew that box would teach you right. Knew it would make you understand." Afi bit back the rage that threatened to spill out and helped him stand, letting him lean his weight on her. He was heavier than she expected, and she could smell the bourbon on his breath, the sweat of sickness on his skin. As she guided him toward his bedroom, he stumbled, and she caught him, her face ending up close to his. Too close. Close enough to see the broken blood vessels in his eyes, the gray pallor of his poisoned skin. "Masa," she whispered, and there was something in her voice, not seduction exactly, but something that made him pause, made him look at her with confusion and desire mixed together. You're different," he mumbled. "Something about you." "I learned my lesson, Masa," Afi said, her lips coated with the final dose of poison, barely inches from his. "You taught me well. And now..." She leaned in, her stomach churning with revulsion, her spirit screaming in protest, but her will iron strong. "Now I want to thank you properly." Before he could respond, before his addled brain could process what was happening, she pressed her lips to his. It wasn't a kiss of love or even lust. It was a kiss of death, delivered with the precision of an executioner and the rage of generations. She felt the poison transfer from her lips to his, felt him try to pull away in confusion. But she held the kiss just long enough to ensure the dose was delivered. When she finally stepped back, Hawthorne stood swaying, his hand going to his mouth, his eyes wide with sudden understanding. What did you..." "I learned my lesson, Sinho," Afi repeated, and now her voice was different, harder, colder, carrying the weight of her true name and power. "You taught me that survival means doing whatever's necessary. You taught me that power comes from taking what you want. You taught me that the weak exist to serve the strong." She watched as his legs began to buckle, as the massive dose of concentrated poison hit his system like a hammer. "The only thing is, Masa, you made one mistake. You thought 90 days in that box would break me, but it just showed me who was really strong and who was really weak." Hawthorne crashed to his knees, gasping, his hands clutching at his chest. You poisoned me. I survived," Afi interrupted, standing over him like judgment itself. "I endured what would have killed you in a week. I walked with the ancestors and came back. And now you gon' learn what that box really feels like, from the inside, while I hold the key." His eyes rolled back, and he collapsed fully, his body convulsing once before going still. Not dead, not yet, but unconscious, helpless, at her mercy. Which was none at all. Afi stood over Elias Hawthorne's prone form, her chest heaving, her lips still tingling from the poison, and felt something break loose inside her. Not breaking down, but breaking free. The last chain. The final link that had bound her to submission and fear. She went to the window and signaled with the lamp. 3 flashes, the code they'd agreed upon. Within minutes, Big Moses appeared at the back door, his massive frame filling the doorway, the secret key hidden in his palm. "It's done," Afi said simply. Moses looked at Hawthorne's unconscious body and nodded slow. "Then it's time. Let's show this devil what justice looks like." Together they lifted the master's body, surprisingly light now, wasted by weeks of poison, and began the journey to the yard, where the hot box waited in the darkness like an open mouth, hungry for the meal it had been denied 90 days ago. The ancestors watched. Oya smiled, and in the quarters, those who knew gathered in silent witness as the wheel of fate turned, and the oppressor became the oppressed. The kiss that killed hadn't ended his life, not yet. But it had sealed his fate as surely as that iron door would soon seal him into his own torture chamber. And this time, there would be no mercy, no forgiveness, no redemption, only justice, ancient and terrible and absolutely earned. Listen here, child, 'cause what I'm about to tell you is about more than just a piece of iron. This here's about transformation, about how something made to bind can become something that liberates, about how the very tools of oppression can be turned against the oppressor when wielded by righteous hands. This is the story of a key, Not just any key, but a key born in fire, shaped by resistance and blessed by the ancestors themselves. Big Moses carried Hawthorne's unconscious body through the darkness like he was hauling a sack of rotten grain. With strength but no gentleness, with purpose but no care. Afi walked beside him, her one good eye gleaming in the moonlight, her hand clutching the mojo bag Mother Bess had given her months ago. The quarters was silent but watchful. She could feel eyes on them from cracked doors and windows, feel the collective held breath of her people as they witnessed what they'd only dreamed about in their most secret prayers. When they reached the hot box, Moses set Hawthorne down in the dirt and straightened, his massive chest heaving. "I've been working on that key for 2 months," he said quietly. "Ever since the day they threw you in here. Every night after the overseer went to sleep, I'd stoke my forge and work that iron, shaping it, testing it, making sure it was perfect." He reached into his shirt and pulled out a key, crude-looking but carefully crafted, the teeth filed precise to match the lock. Even in the dim moonlight, Afi could see it wasn't just functional metalwork. Moses had carved symbols into the shaft, African symbols, protection marks, signs of power that she recognized from Mother Bess's teachings. "This ain't just metal," Moses continued, his voice thick with emotion. "This is every prayer I ever prayed for freedom. This is every time I had to stand silent while injustice happened. This is every scar on my back and every tear I never let them see me cry. I put all that into this key, sister, all of it." Afi took it from him with trembling hands. The key was still warm from being pressed against his chest, and as her fingers closed around it, she felt something. A pulse, a vibration, like the key itself was alive. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It's justice," Moses corrected. "Now let's see if it works." Together they dragged Hawthorne to the hotbox. He was starting to stir, groaning softly, but the poison kept him weak, disoriented. They positioned him at the open door of that iron coffin, and Afi paused for just a moment, staring at the darkness inside. She'd spent 90 days in there. 90 days of heat that felt like hell's own breath. 90 days of darkness so complete it swallowed hope. 90 days of pain that transformed her from Peggy the slave into Afi the warrior. And now she was about to put her tormentor in that same space. "You sure about this?" Moses asked, though they both knew the answer. "Once we lock him in, there ain't no going back. They'll hunt us, they'll bring the patty rollers, they'll—" "I know," Afi interrupted, "but we ain't running, not yet. First he suffers. Then we decide what comes next." Moses nodded and helped her push Hawthorne into the box. The master, former master, Afi corrected herself, barely fit, his body cramping immediately into the same tortured position she'd endured for 3 months. He groaned louder now, his eyes fluttering open. "What? Where?" His voice was weak, confused. Afi leaned down so her face was close to the opening, so he could see her clearly in the moonlight. Her scarred face, her blind eye, her smile of terrible satisfaction. "Remember this place, Massa?" she said softly. "You put me in here for 90 days. Said it would teach me my place, said it would break me." She laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Well, it taught me something all right. Taught me that the strong don't stay strong forever. Taught me that every tyrant eventually meets his judgment." Hawthorne's eyes widened with understanding and horror. No, you can't. I'm a white man. You can't do this. They'll hang you. They'll burn this whole plantation." "Maybe," Afi agreed, "but you won't be around to see it. See, I learned patience in this box, Massa. Learned to endure. Learned to wait for exactly the right moment." She held up the key Moses had made, letting it catch the moonlight. "And I learned that every lock can be opened. Every chain can be broken, every prison can be escaped, or turned around on them that made it." She slammed the door shut, and the sound echoed across the quiet plantation like a death knell. Hawthorne's scream was muffled by the thick iron, but she could hear it, could feel it vibrating through the metal. Now came the moment of truth. Afi inserted the key into the lock with hands that didn't shake despite everything she'd been through. For a heartbeat, nothing happened, and she felt a spike of fear. What if it didn't work? What if Moses's measurements was wrong? What if... The key turned smooth as butter, and the lock clicked home with a sound that seemed to satisfy something deep in the universe's sense of balance. "It works," Moses breathed, his voice filled with awe and vindication. "Sweet Jesus and all the ancestors, it actually works." Afi tested it, locking and unlocking the door 3 times to be sure. Each time, the key performed perfect, the mechanism smooth despite months of rust and weather. "You made a miracle, brother," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "No," Moses replied. "The ancestors made it. I was just the hands they used." Inside the box, Hawthorne was fully awake now, screaming, begging, promising anything and everything if she'd just let him out. "I'll free you. I'll free all of you. I'll sign the papers. I'll give you money. Please, God, please don't leave me in here." Afi pressed her face close to one of the air slits, her voice calm and cold. "You had 90 days to think about my suffering, Massa. Now you get to experience it yourself. And every day you're in there, I want you to remember, this is what you did to me. This is what you did to countless others. This is the debt being paid." She stood and turned to Moses. "How long we got before someone notices he's gone? Mistress ain't back for 3 days. Pritchard don't check on the master in the morning. He just assumes he's sleeping off his bourbon. I'd say we got at least 24 hours before anyone starts asking questions." "Good. Then we use that time to prepare. Get word to Mother Bess, to Aunt Dinah, to everyone who's ready to move when the time comes. And Moses?" She looked at him with fierce gratitude. "Thank you for the key, for believing in me, for being willing to risk everything." Moses pulled her into a brief, tight embrace. "We family, sister. And family protects family, even when the law says we ain't supposed to be human enough to have families." He pulled back, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "What you did tonight, surviving that box, turning the tables on him, that's going in the stories our children's children will tell. That's going in the history that the white folks can't write." As Moses headed back to his forge to hide the evidence of his night's work, Afi stood alone by the hot box, listening to Hawthorne's muffled screams and pleas. The night was deep and quiet around her, but she could feel the quarters stirring, feel the shift in the air as words spread in whispers from cabin to cabin. She done it. She locked the master in his own torture box. She got the key. She got the power now. Afi pulled the key from the lock and held it up to the stars, letting the moonlight dance across its surface. This key had been forged in secret, in darkness, by hands that knew bondage. It had been shaped with hope and rage in equal measure. And now it represented something bigger than just one lock on one iron box. It represented the possibility that the tools of oppression could be seized, could be turned, could be used against those who'd created them. It represented the knowledge that patient resistance could triumph where open rebellion would fail. It represented the truth that justice might be delayed, but it could not be forever denied. She thought about all the keys that existed in this world of slavery. Keys to shackles, keys to auction houses, keys to slave quarters that was locked from the outside at night. Thought about how every one of those keys was held by white hands, symbols of control and domination. But tonight she held a key, and she wasn't giving it up. Mother Bess appeared from the shadows like a spirit, her old eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "I felt the shift in the air," she said quietly. "Felt the ancestors rejoicing. You done it, Chili. You done what needed doing." "It's not finished yet," Afi replied. "No," Mother Bess agreed, "but it started. And sometimes starting is the hardest part." She reached out and touched the key, her fingers tracing the protection symbols Moses had carved. This key was forged in fire and blessed by suffering. It's got power beyond just opening locks. You guard it well, hear me? When the time comes to run, you take it with you. It's proof, it's testimony, it's evidence that we fought back. Inside the box, Hawthorne had stopped screaming and started begging in a different way. Not for freedom now, but for water. For mercy, for just a moment of relief from the heat that was already building as the October night gave way to morning. Afi listened to his pleas with the same compassion he'd shown her. None at all. "How long?" Mother Bess asked. "As long as it takes," Afi replied. "He gave me 90 days. I'm thinking 9 will be enough to make my point. 9 days to cook him proper. 9 days to let him feel what I felt. 9 days to settle the debt. And after," Afi looked at the old root woman, then at the key in her hand, then at the quarters where her people waited and watched and hoped. "After we run. Everyone who wants freedom, everyone who's ready to risk it, we head north, to the underground railroad stations Mother Bess knows about. We use the confusion to get as many folks out as we can." "Some won't make it," Mother Bess said quietly. "I know, but some will, and that's more than we had yesterday." As the first hints of dawn began to gray the eastern sky, Afi took the key and hung it on a leather cord around her neck, tucking it under her dress where it rested against her heart. The key that Moses forged. The key born in fire and resistance. The key that proved once and for all that no lock was permanent, no chain unbreakable, no prison escape-proof, if you had the courage to seize the tools of your own liberation. And in that hot box, as morning heat began to build, Elias Hawthorne learned what Afi had learned 3 months before. That hell ain't just a place you go when you die. Sometimes, child, sometimes it's a place you're locked into while you're still breathing. And the only question that matters is who holds the key. Now you see, people, sometimes the devil throws himself a party while judgment waits at the door. Sometimes the wicked celebrate their own power right before it gets snatched away. And sometimes, child, the loudest laughter in the big house is just covering up the sound of chains breaking in the quarters. This here's about the last night Elias Hawthorne walked free, though he didn't know it yet. The night he decided to throw himself a birthday celebration while his own doom was already mixed into the punch bowl. It had been 2 weeks since Afi emerged from the hotbox. 2 weeks of serving poison 3 drops at a time. 2 weeks of watching Hawthorne deteriorate. But the man was stubborn, proud and foolish in equal measure. And when his 42nd birthday rolled around on a crisp November evening, he insisted on throwing a party despite his failing health. "Nothing elaborate," he told Mistress Caroline, his voice weaker than it used to be but still carrying that tone of entitlement. "Just a few neighboring plantation owners, some cards, good bourbon. Show them we're still prosperous despite the recent difficulties." The recent difficulties he referred to was his mysterious illness that had the white doctors scratching their heads. Weight loss, persistent cough, trembling hands, night sweats. But Hawthorne, in his arrogance, refused to see it as anything serious, just a passing ailment. Nothing that good liquor and the company of fellow masters couldn't cure. Martha came to Afi in the kitchen 3 days before the party, her face grave with purpose. Mother Bess sent word. Says the night of the party is the night. The moon will be right, the ancestors will be watching, and Hawthorne will be surrounded by enough white folks that nobody will suspect what's really happening till it's too late. "What do I need to do?" Afi asked, her hands steady as she kneaded bread dough. "Everything you've been doing, but more. He'll be drinking heavy that night. It's his nature to show off, to prove he's still strong. You make sure every glass that touches his lips has the poison in it. Not 3 drops, no more. 5, 6, however many you can manage without him tasting it. By the end of the night, he should barely be able to stand." "And then?" Martha's eyes glittered hard as flint. "Then you and Moses do what needs doing. Pritchard will be distracted watching the other slaves serve. The guests will be too drunk to notice anything amiss. Mistress Caroline will be playing hostess. It's the perfect moment. Confusion, celebration, nobody paying attention to where the master goes after the party ends." The night of the party arrived with a cold wind that rattled the windows and made the fires burn bright in every fireplace. The big house blazed with candles and oil lamps, and the smell of roasted pig and sweet potato pie drifted through the rooms. 5 plantation owners arrived with their wives, dressed in their finest, ready to eat Hawthorne's food, drink his liquor, and pretend his declining health wasn't obvious to everyone present. Afi, along with 3 other house servants, moved through the gathering like shadows, seen but not really noticed, present but not considered human enough to matter. She carried trays of bourbon and wine, refilled glasses, cleared plates, and all the while her hand would pause over Hawthorne's glass, and 5 drops would fall silent as tears into the amber liquid. The white folks talked loud and careless, the way they always did around enslaved people, as if black ears couldn't hear or black minds couldn't understand. They discussed cotton prices and runaway slave problems and the growing tensions between North and South. One portly man with mutton chop whiskers complained about abolitionists ruining good business. Another bragged about a new overseer who'd increased productivity by 20% through proper motivation, which meant more whippings, more fear. Hawthorne sat at the head of the table, sweating despite the cool evening, his face flushed with drink and fever, trying to maintain the appearance of health and authority. "Gentlemen," he said, raising his glass, his 4th of the night, each one poisoned, "to prosperity, to the Southern way of life, to keeping our property in line and our profits high." "Hear, hear," the others chorused, and glasses clinked. Afi stood behind his chair, her face an emotionless mask, and watched him drink deep. The poison was working faster now, accumulating in his system like sediment in a river. His hands shook as he set the glass down. His laugh came too loud, too forced. As the night wore on, the party grew louder, sloppier. The white men played cards and told crude jokes. The women gossiped in the parlor, their voices sharp with judgment disguised as concern. And through it all, Afi moved silent and steady, a ghost in their midst carrying death on a silver tray. Around 11 o'clock, Hawthorne excused himself, stumbling slightly as he stood. "Need some air," he mumbled, waving off offers of help. "Just the bourbon hitting harder than usual." The guests laughed, made jokes about him getting old, about not being able to hold his liquor like he used to. They didn't see what Afi saw, the gray pallor beneath his flushed skin, the way his pupils had dilated strange, the sweat that wasn't from heat but from his body, trying desperately to fight the poison flooding his system. He made it as far as the back veranda before his legs gave out. He caught himself on the railing, breathing hard, his vision swimming. Afi appeared beside him like she'd materialized from the shadows. "Massa, you need help getting to your room?" He looked at her with eyes that couldn't quite focus. "Peggy." "Yes." "Room." "Can't." His words slurred together, his tongue thick and clumsy. She took his arm, supporting his weight, and began guiding him away from the party. But instead of heading toward his bedroom, she steered him toward the back door, toward the yard, toward the place where the hot box waited in the darkness. Big Moses emerged from behind the smokehouse, his massive form blocking any retreat. Between the two of them, they half-carried, half-dragged Hawthorne across the yard. He tried to resist, tried to call out, but the poison had stolen his strength and slurred his speech. His cries came out as mumbled protests that the wind carried away. Inside the big house, the party continued. Laughter and music drifted through the windows. The white folks celebrated, oblivious to the drama unfolding just yards away in the darkness. When they reached the hot box, Hawthorne's eyes focused enough to recognize where they were taking him. No, you can't. I'm a white man. You can't do this." "You said that before," Afi reminded him, her voice cold as the November wind. "Right before I put you in here the first time. Remember? And yet here we are." They positioned him at the opening of the iron coffin. In his weakened state, he couldn't fight them, could barely even support his own weight. Martha appeared from the shadows with a cup of water laced with even more poison. The final dose, Mother Bess's strongest concoction. "Drink," Afi commanded, pressing the cup to his lips. He tried to turn his head away, but Moses held him firm, and Afi poured the liquid into his mouth, forcing him to swallow. He gagged, choked, but it went down. "That," Afi said softly, "is for my son Josiah, who you sold away. That's for the 90 days you baked me in this box. That's for every woman you violated, every man you whipped, every child you tore from their mama's arms. You wanted to teach me my place? Well, Massa, lesson's over. And you failed." Hawthorne's eyes rolled back as the concentrated poison hit his system. His body went limp, and they pushed him into the hot box with no more ceremony than you'd give a sack of rotten grain. The iron door slammed shut with a sound like divine judgment. Afi pulled out the key Moses had forged and locked it with hands that didn't shake. 9 days, she said to the unmoving form inside. You gave me 90. I'm only giving you 9. Consider it mercy. Moses placed a hand on her shoulder. The guests will notice he's gone soon. We got maybe an hour before they start searching. Then we have work to do, Afi replied. She turned to Martha and the 2 other house servants who'd appeared, young Sarah and old Timothy, both ready to run, both willing to risk everything. Spread the word through the quarters. Anyone who wants freedom, anyone who's ready to move, they got till dawn to prepare. We leaving this place and we ain't never coming back. Inside the big house, someone finally noticed the master's prolonged absence. Pritchard was called. Torches were lit, and white men stumbled drunkenly into the yard calling Hawthorne's name. But Afi and the others had already melted back into the quarters, moving cabin to cabin, whispering the news that would change everything. The master is locked away. The key is in our hands. Freedom is calling, and we got to answer now, tonight, before the dawn brings consequences we can't escape. The party continued inside the big house, but outside, in the darkness of the quarters, another kind of celebration was beginning. Quiet, desperate, hopeful. The celebration of people about to risk everything for a chance at something they'd only dreamed about. Freedom. And in the hot box, Elias Hawthorne lay unconscious, locked in his own instrument of torture, about to learn what Afi had learned 3 months before. That hell has many rooms, and sometimes justice demands you visit every single one. Listen here, child, 'cause this is the moment everything changed. When the wheel of fate turned complete. When the oppressed became the keeper, and the master became the prisoner. When justice finally showed her face after hiding so long behind the mask of bondage. This here's about the morning Elias Hawthorne woke up in that iron coffin and realized the world had flipped upside down while he slept. Dawn broke cold and gray over Hawthorne Plantation, the kind of morning where your breath makes ghosts in the air and the ground crunches hard with frost. Inside the big house, chaos reigned. The party guests had searched for their host till past midnight, calling his name, checking every room, growing increasingly concerned and confused. Mistress Caroline was beside herself, alternating between hysterics and cold fury. Pritchard had roused the field hands, forced them to search the grounds with torches despite the late hour. They'd looked in the stables, the smokehouse, the tool sheds, even the slave quarters, everywhere except the one place nobody thought to check. The hot box. Why would they? The master owned the only key, kept it on his personal ring. And besides, the very idea that a white man, especially Elias Hawthorne, proud owner of 200 souls, could end up in that devil's cage was unthinkable. That box was for slaves, for punishment, for breaking the spirit of those who forgot their place. It couldn't possibly be for him, but it was. When the first rays of weak November sun hit the iron surface of the hot box, the metal began its familiar transformation from cold to warm to scorching. And inside, Elias Hawthorne woke to darkness and confusion, and the beginning of a nightmare that would last 9 days. At first, he didn't understand where he was. His head pounded from the poison and bourbon, his mouth tasted like copper and ash, and his body was cramped into a space so small he couldn't straighten his legs or stand. The darkness was absolute, suffocating. Then memory crashed back, and with it came terror so pure it made him scream. "Help! Someone help me! I'm in the box! The hot box! Get me out!" His voice, muffled by thick iron, barely carried beyond the immediate vicinity. But someone heard. Afi stood 10 feet away, wrapped in a shawl against the morning cold, her one good eye watching the box with an expression that held no pity, no mercy, no hesitation. She'd been there all night standing guard, making sure no one stumbled upon their secret before the plan could be executed fully. "You awake, massa?" she called out, her voice carrying clear in the quiet morning. "Good. I was hoping you'd wake up early. Got a lot to discuss, you and me." Inside the box, Hawthorne's screaming stopped abruptly. "Peggy?" Peggy, is that you? Get me out of here. Now, that's an order. Afi walked closer, knelt by one of the air slits so he could hear her perfect. See, that's your first mistake, Masa. Thinking you can still give orders. Thinking you still got power here. But you don't. You locked away in that box, and I got the key. She pulled the iron key from beneath her dress, held it up where he could see it through the narrow opening. This here's Big Moses's work. Forged it special, just for this occasion. You can't do this. Hawthorne's voice cracked with desperation. I'm a white man. You're a slave. This is murder. They'll hang you. They'll burn you alive. Maybe, Afi agreed calmly, but you won't be alive to see it. And honestly, Masa, after what I've been through, death don't scare me much anymore. You made sure of that when you put me in this box for 90 days. She heard him shifting inside, trying to find a position that didn't hurt, already feeling the cramping that would only get worse. How long? He gasped. How long have I been in here? About 8 hours, Afi replied. You got unconscious around 11 last night. It's just past dawn now. So really, you just getting started. I figure you got... She paused, pretending to calculate. About 8 days and 16 hours to go. The silence that followed was louder than any scream. Then, 9 days? You're going to leave me in here for 9 days. That's right. You gave me 90. I'm giving you 9. Seems fair, don't it? Generous, even. Afi's voice hardened. Or did you think you deserved better treatment than you gave me? Hawthorne's breathing came fast and panicked now. She could hear it through the slits, the hyperventilation of someone realizing the full extent of their situation. I'll give you anything. Money, your freedom papers. I'll free everyone on this plantation. Just let me out. You think I trust your promises, Masa? You think I believe a word that comes out your lying mouth? Afi laughed, bitter and hard. You promised my boy Josiah would stay with me if I worked hard. Then you sold him away soon as you needed cash. You promised no slave would be punished without cause. Then you threw me in this box because I wouldn't let you rape me. Your promises ain't worth the breath it takes to speak them. The sun was climbing higher now, and already the box was warming. In a few hours it would be an oven. Afi knew the progression intimately, had lived it day by day for 3 months. She knew exactly what he was experiencing and exactly what was coming. Water, Hawthorne croaked. At least give me water. Afi considered this. See, here's the thing, Masa. You gave me water once a day. A cup. Maybe a cup and a half if the boy bringing it was feeling generous. Barely enough to survive. So that's what you getting. 1 cup a day, at sunset. And you better drink it slow, 'cause that's all there is. You're insane. You'll kill me. No, Masa, you won't die from this. Not if you strong as you always said you was. Not if you got the endurance you claimed made white folks superior. You should survive just fine. She leaned closer to the slit. But you gon' suffer. Lord Jesus, you gon' suffer something terrible. And every minute of that suffering, I want you to think about what you did. To me, to Josiah, to all of us. By noon, when the sun stood high and merciless overhead, the screaming started in earnest. The iron box was positioned in full sun with no shade, and the Virginia sky, though cold at night, could still deliver punishing heat during the day. The temperature inside the box climbed steadily. 90 degrees, 100, 110. Hawthorne's screams mixed with pleas, with prayers, with curses. God. Someone. Anyone. I'm dying in here. Help me, please. But the plantation was in turmoil. Mistress Caroline had sent riders to neighboring plantations asking if anyone had seen her husband. Pritchard was organizing search parties. The house servants moved through their duties with faces carefully blank, giving nothing away. And the field hands whispered among themselves, knowing something big was happening but not quite sure what. Only a select few knew the truth. Afi, Big Moses, Mother Bess, Martha, old Aunt Dinah, and a handful of others who'd been brought into the plan. They moved through the day with purpose, preparing for what would come when the 9 days ended. As afternoon faded toward evening, Afi returned to the hot box with a cup of water and a piece of hardtack bread. She opened a small feeding slot that Big Moses had cleverly incorporated into his key design. A slot that could only be opened from the outside, that allowed food and water to be passed through without opening the main door. "Dinner time, massa," she called. Hawthorne's hand shot through the opening, desperate, grabbing. "Water! Give me water, please!" She passed the cup through but held the bread back. "First, I got something to say. Something I need you to understand. Anything! Just give me water. You remember that night you came to my cabin? The night you tried to force yourself on me? You remember what you said when I fought back?" Afi's voice was steady, relentless. "You said tomorrow you gon' learn what fire really means, you remember that?" A whimper from inside the box. "Well, massa, tomorrow done came, and I learned. Oh, I learned so much." She finally passed the bread through. "I learned that fire purifies. I learned that suffering can transform a person. I learned that the weak can become strong when they got nothing left to lose. And most importantly, I learned that justice, real justice, sometimes has to be taken, 'cause it sure ain't given freely." She heard him drinking, the water sloshing as his shaking hands spilled half of it. The bread disappeared through the slot, and she heard him choking it down despite the dryness of his throat. "9 days," she repeated. "You gave me 90. I'm giving you 9. And when those 9 days is up, I'm opening this box. But not to let you go free, massa. To show everyone what happens to men who think they can play God with other people's lives. What are you going to do to me?" His voice was barely a whisper now. Afi stood, brushing dust from her dress. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of blood and fire. "I'm going to show this plantation, this county, this whole goddamn South that we ain't property. We ain't animals. We ain't less than human. We people, massa. People who feel pain and love and rage just like you. And when you push people far enough, when you take everything from them, they push back." She started to walk away, then paused. "Oh, and massa, that water I just gave you? It had a little something extra in it, not poison, don't worry. Just some herbs Mother Bess prepared. They gon' keep you alive, keep your heart beating strong. Can't have you dying too quick. You got 9 days to serve, and by God and all the ancestors, you gon' serve every single one of them." As darkness fell over the plantation, Hawthorne's screams echoed into the night. Not loud enough to reach the big house, but loud enough to reach the quarters, where people listened with mixed emotions of fear, satisfaction, and awe. The master was cooking in his own pot. The oppressor was trapped in his own cage. And the woman he'd tried to break was standing guard outside, counting down the days until judgment would be complete. Day 1 of 9. 8 more to go. And every single one of them would be exactly as terrible as he deserved. Now listen here, child, 'cause what I'm about to tell you is hard to hear but necessary to understand. This here's about the 9 days that Elias Hawthorne spent learning what Afi already knew. That hell ain't a place you go after death. It's a place you can visit while your heart still beats. These 9 days was justice served slow, deliberate, measured out like medicine that tastes bitter but cures what ails you. So settle in and bear witness, 'cause this is memory that can't be forgotten. Day 2 dawned with search parties scouring the countryside for the missing master. Riders went out to neighboring plantations to the county seat, even sent word to Richmond that Elias Hawthorne had vanished without trace. Mistress Caroline wept and raged in equal measure, convinced her husband had been murdered or kidnapped or run off with some woman. Pritchard whipped 3 field hands on suspicion of knowing something, but they genuinely didn't. Only the inner circle knew where the master really was. Inside the hot box, Hawthorne had stopped screaming, not because the suffering lessened, but because his throat was too raw to produce sound. The heat was relentless, turning his body into a furnace of sweat and desperation. His fine clothes, already soiled from the first day, clung to him like a second skin of shame. Afi came at sunset with water and a piece of salt pork. "Day 2, massa," she announced through the feeding slot. "How you feeling?" "Please," Hawthorne croaked, his voice barely human. "Please. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything. Just let me out." "You sorry?" Afi's laugh was sharp as broken glass. "That's nice. I wonder if sorry brings back my son. I wonder if sorry erases 90 days of torture. I wonder if sorry means anything at all from a man who never meant it in his life. She passed the water through. He grabbed it with shaking hands, spilling half before it reached his cracked lips. Day 3. Brought thunderstorms that cooled the air but turned the hot box into a different kind of hell. Water seeped through the slits, not enough to provide relief but enough to make everything damp, moldy. Hawthorne's skin began to break down where his body pressed against the iron, developing sores that wept clear fluid. The plantation was in chaos now. White authorities had been called. The sheriff came with dogs searching for signs of struggle or blood. They questioned slaves roughly, beat a few for looking suspicious, but found nothing. How could they? The answer lay right under their noses in plain sight, in the one place their minds refused to consider. Afi watched them search with cold satisfaction. She'd moved her guard position, no longer standing directly by the box, but watching from the kitchen window where she could see anyone approaching. At night, she or Big Moses kept vigil, making sure no one stumbled upon their secret. When she brought his evening ration, Hawthorne was weeping. Not loud sobbing, he didn't have the strength, but silent tears that mixed with the rainwater on his face. "My children," he whispered. "I have children. 3 children who need their father." "I had a child too," Afi replied, her voice ice cold. "You sold him, remember? 6 years old, crying for his mama. You think he needed me less than yours need you?" No response, just more silent tears. Day 4 saw Hawthorne begin to hallucinate. The combination of heat, dehydration, poison still in his system, and sheer terror fractured his mind. Afi heard him talking to people who wasn't there, arguing with his dead father, begging forgiveness from God. His waste accumulated in the box, the smell becoming unbearable even from outside. Mother Bess came to inspect, her old face grave. "He dying yet?" she asked. "Not yet," Afi replied. "The herbs you gave me is keeping him alive, but his mind's going. Good. Let him taste madness. Let him know what it's like when reality falls apart." The old conjure woman touched the hot box with one gnarled hand. "The ancestors is pleased. They watching, they witnessing. This is justice, Chili, and it's long overdue." Day 5 was the turning point. Hawthorne stopped responding when Afi brought food and water. She thought maybe he'd died, but when she pressed her ear to the slit, she could hear faint, ragged breathing. He'd retreated somewhere inside himself, gone to that place Afi had gone on day 44 when she died, and walked with the ancestors. But unlike Afi, Hawthorne found no wisdom there. No transformation, just darkness and despair, and the weight of every sin he'd ever committed pressing down on him like Virginia red clay filling a grave. Day 6 brought unexpected danger. One of the white neighbors, a man named Colonel Morrison, insisted on searching the grounds again, this time more thoroughly. He walked right past the hot box, so close Afi could have reached out and touched him, but he never looked down, never questioned the iron structure that had been there so long it was part of the landscape. That night, Martha came to Afi with urgent news. "They planning to call in the militia. Mistress Caroline is convinced abolitionists kidnapped her husband. If soldiers come, they'll search everything. We got to move soon." 3 more days, Afi insisted. He got to serve his full sentence. 3 more days, then we move. Day 7 was when Mistress Caroline finally broke down completely. She took to her bed, leaving Pritchard in charge. The overseer, sensing opportunity in chaos, began helping himself to the master's bourbon, spending less time searching and more time imagining how he might take over if Hawthorne never returned. Inside the box, Hawthorne had stopped being human in any meaningful way. He was just a collection of suffering and regret, a cautionary tale wrapped in ruined flesh. When Afi brought his ration, he didn't even reach for it. She had to push it through and leave it lying there, hoping some survival instinct would make him eat. Day 8 saw the first snow of winter, just a light dusting, but enough to make the iron box cold at night, hot during the day. a torture of extremes. Hawthorne's breathing had grown shallow, rapid. His pulse, when Afi checked it through the slit by touching his wrist, was thready and weak. Big Moses pulled her aside that evening. "Sister, we got to make a choice. He might not survive one more day. If he dies in there, if they find his body, they'll kill every slave on this plantation. Women, children, everyone. You got your justice, but now we got to think about survival." Afi stood silent for a long moment, staring at the box that had held her tormentor for 8 days. She thought about Josiah, wondered if he was still alive somewhere in Georgia, wondered if he'd grown tall, if he remembered her voice. She thought about the 90 days she'd endured, about the woman she'd been before, and the warrior she'd become. "One more day," she said finally. 9 days, that's what I promised, that's what justice demands. Day 9. Arrived cold and clear, the sky sharp blue and cloudless. At dawn, Afi stood before the hot box with Big Moses, Martha, Mother Bess, and a dozen other slaves who'd been part of the plan. They formed a circle around the iron coffin, and Mother Bess began to pray, not in English, but in Yoruba, calling on the ancestors, on Oya, on all the Orishas to witness what was about to happen. When she finished, Afi stepped forward with the key. Her hand trembled, not with fear but with the weight of the moment. 9 days. Elias Hawthorne had been locked in this box for 9 days, enduring a fraction of what he'd inflicted on her. She inserted the key and turned it. The lock clicked open with a sound like judgment being rendered. Big Moses and another strong field hand pulled the door open. The smell that emerged was beyond description. Human waste, infection, death creeping close. For a moment, nothing moved inside. Then Hawthorne's hand appeared, groping blindly at the light. They pulled him out, and Lord have mercy, what emerged barely looked human. His skin was gray as ash, covered in sores and filth. His eyes, when they finally opened, was vacant, haunted, seeing things that wasn't there. His fine clothes was rags. His proud bearing was gone, replaced by the broken posture of a man who'd been shattered and poorly reassembled. He tried to speak, but no words came, just a rasping sound like wind through dead leaves. Afi knelt beside him, looking into those haunted eyes. 9 days, Massa. You survived, congratulations. You stronger than I thought. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper only he could hear. But you'll never be the same. Every night for the rest of your life, however long that is, you'll wake up screaming, trapped in the dark, feeling that heat. You'll never forget. And that's the real punishment. She stood and turned to the assembled slaves. Wash him, dress him in clean clothes. Then we carry him to the front of the big house and leave him there. When they find him, he won't be able to tell them what happened. His mind's too broken. They'll think he wandered off, got lost, suffered exposure, and we... She looked at each face, saw the determination there. We leaving, tonight. Everyone who wants freedom, everyone who's ready. We heading north to the underground railroad stations. Mother Bess knows the way. That night, as promised, they laid Hawthorne on the front porch of the big house, alive but destroyed. And then, in the darkness before dawn, 47 enslaved people walked away from Hawthorne Plantation, following the North Star toward freedom. Some made it, others didn't. But that's a story for another telling. All that matters is this. Elias Hawthorne survived his 9 days in the hot box, but the man who emerged wasn't the man who went in. And Afi, no longer Peggy, never again just a slave, she survived too. And that survival, child, that was the greatest victory of all. Now you see, people, fire has always been sacred to us. We who carried Africa in our blood, who remembered when fire meant gathering, celebration, transformation. But slavery tried to make us forget that power, tried to make fire just another tool of their cruelty, burning brands into our flesh, lighting torches for their hunting parties. What I'm about to tell you now is how we took fire back, how we remembered its true purpose, purification, liberation, and the burning away of everything that held us captive. The night of the 9th day, after they'd pulled Hawthorne from the box and left him broken on the big house porch, 47 souls gathered in the darkness of the quarters. Not all 200 slaves on the plantation. Some was too old, too young, too scared, or too broken to risk the run. But 47 was ready. 47 had heard the call to freedom, and 47 would answer. Afi stood before them, her scarred face illuminated by the single candle Mother Bess held. She'd wrapped herself in a shawl that had belonged to her mama, Iodel, the only possession from Africa that remained in the family. Around her neck hung the key Moses had forged, and in her one good eye burned a fire that had nothing to do with the candle flame. "We leaving tonight," she said, her voice steady and strong. "But before we go, we got work to do. This plantation, this place of suffering, it can't stand. Can't be allowed to continue operating like nothing happened. We got to make sure the world knows. We was here, we suffered, we resisted, and we won." Big Moses stepped forward, his massive arms carrying bundles of kindling and torch-soaked rags. "The big house goes first," he said. "Then the overseer's cabin. Then the barn where they kept the auction records. All them ledgers listing our names like we was cattle. We burn it all." Martha, the head house servant who'd served the Hawthorns for 30 years, nodded grimly. "I know where Mistress Caroline keeps the money. Gold coins in a strongbox under their bed. We taking that. It's owed to us, wages for 30 years of unpaid labor. We'll need it for the journey north." Old Aunt Dinah spoke up, her voice quavering but determined. "What about the others, the ones not coming with us?" "We wake them," Afi replied. "Give them the choice. Anyone who wants to stay can stay. We won't force nobody. But they got to know, when that big house burns, when the authorities come investigating, life here gon' change. Might get better, might get worse. But it won't be the same." Mother Bess lifted her gnarled hands for attention. "Before we burn anything, we got to honor the dead. All them graves in the slave cemetery with no markers, no names, just bodies thrown in the ground like they never mattered. We can't take them with us, but we can speak their names one last time. Let the ancestors know they ain't forgotten." And so they did. In the cold November night, 47 people walked to the slave cemetery, a patch of hard ground on the edge of the plantation where countless bodies lay buried in unmarked graves. They formed a circle, and one by one, people spoke names. Mama Ruth, who birthed 12 children and saw 10 of them sold away. Brother Samuel, who was whipped to death for learning to read. Sister Mary, who threw herself in the river rather than be violated again. Little Thomas, who died of fever because the master wouldn't pay for a doctor. On and on, the names rolled out like a litany of pain, like a roster of martyrs, like a prayer for justice. Afi added her own, Iodel, my mama, who survived the Middle Passage but died enslaved. And Josiah, my son, stolen from me and lost to Georgia. If he lives, may he be free. If he died, may he rest with the ancestors. When the last name was spoken, Mother Bess began to sing, a spiritual, but not one the white folks had taught them. This was older, African, a melody that predated slavery and would outlast it. The others joined in, their voices rising into the night sky, carrying the names of the dead up to the ancestors, up to the Orishas, up to whatever god or gods might be listening. Then they moved. Big Moses and 5 other strong men went to the big house first. They soaked the base of the walls with lamp oil, piled kindling against the wooden siding, and prepared the torches. Inside, Mistress Caroline slept fitfully, exhausted from days of grief and confusion. Pritchard was passed out drunk in his cabin. The few house servants who wasn't part of the plan had been quietly woken and given the choice. Leave now or stay and face whatever came. Most chose to leave. Martha went inside one last time, not to steal, but to retrieve what was rightfully theirs. She found the strongbox under the bed, the key hidden in Mistress Caroline's jewelry case. Inside was $300 in gold coins, a fortune. She also took documents, bills of sale, ledgers listing every transaction, every slave bought and sold, evidence, testimony, proof that could be used by abolitionists to show the world what slavery really meant. When she emerged, Afi was waiting. Everything? Everything we need, Martha confirmed. Afi turned to face the big house, that symbol of power and oppression, that whitewashed tomb filled with stolen wealth built on black suffering. She thought about all the women who'd been violated within those walls, all the children who'd stood trembling while their fates was decided, all the deals made over bourbon and tobacco that treated human lives like commodities. "Burn it," she said. Big Moses put torch to kindling, and the fire caught immediately, racing up the walls with hungry intensity. Within minutes, the entire first floor was ablaze. The heat drove them back, but they stood watching, transfixed by the sight of their prison burning. Mistress Caroline woke to smoke and came stumbling to the window screaming. Big Moses and another man went in through the back, grabbed her despite her protests, and carried her out. They wasn't murderers, wasn't trying to kill innocents, but they would destroy the system, the structure, the very foundations of the evil that had held them captive. The overseer's cabin went next, then the barn with all its records, the cotton gin, that infernal machine that had broken so many fingers and spirits, the smokehouse, the storage sheds. Building by burning building, they erased the infrastructure of bondage. Field hands who'd decided to stay watched from the quarters, their faces reflecting the firelight, their expressions unreadable. Some looked afraid, others looked satisfied. A few even looked envious of those who was leaving. As the big house collapsed in on itself, sending sparks spiraling into the night sky like liberated souls ascending, Afi felt something break loose inside her chest, not breaking apart, but breaking free. The last chain, the final weight. She was no longer Peggy the slave. She was Afi, daughter of Ayodele, warrior blessed by Oya, survivor of the hot box, keeper of the key. She was free. By the time the fires began to die down, dawn was approaching. The 47 gathered their meager possessions, bundles of food, blankets, the gold coins from the strongbox split among them, and the documents Martha had taken. Mother Bess consulted a crude map she'd memorized from Underground Railroad conductors who'd passed through years before. "We head northwest," she said, pointing. "Stay off roads during day, travel by night. Follow the North Star. There's a Quaker family 2 counties over who will hide us and point us to the next station. From there, it's station to station till we reach Pennsylvania, then maybe Canada." "We won't all make it," someone said quietly. "No," Afi agreed. "Some of us will be caught. Some will die on the road, but some will reach freedom. And those who do will tell this story, will keep the memory alive of what we did here tonight." As they prepared to leave, Afi took one last look at the burning plantation. The hot box sat untouched by flames, that iron coffin gleaming in the firelight like a monument to suffering. She considered destroying it too, but something stopped her. "Leave it," she said to Big Moses. "Leave it standing. Let it be a reminder. Let everyone who comes here after see it and know this is what happened when they pushed us too far." They left Hawthorne on the porch where they'd placed him, alive but destroyed. When the authorities arrived the next day, they'd find him gibbering about darkness and heat and a one-eyed woman who spoke with the voice of God's judgment. They wouldn't believe him, would think he'd gone mad from exposure and fever, would never suspect the truth. As the 47 walked away from Hawthorne Plantation, following the North Star toward an uncertain future, they sang. Not spirituals about patience and suffering, but freedom songs, African chants, hymns of victory. The sound carried across the Virginia countryside, and other slaves, locked in their quarters on other plantations, heard it and wondered. Afi walked at the front, one hand holding Aunt Dinah's elbow to help the old woman over rough ground, the other hand touching the key around her neck. Behind them, the fires burned down to embers, and smoke rose into the dawn sky like a signal, like a prayer, like a promise. The fire had done its work. It had purified, it had liberated, it had transformed ashes into seeds of hope. And though the journey ahead would be hard, though many would fall before reaching free soil, they walked with the knowledge that they had struck a blow against the institution of slavery itself. Not a death blow. That would take a war and more blood than anyone could imagine. But a blow nonetheless. A crack in the foundation, proof that resistance was possible, that justice could be claimed, that the oppressed could become the liberators. And that child, that was worth every risk, every hardship, every mile they'd have to walk in the cold November darkness. They was free, or at least, they was freeing themselves. And that was enough. Listen here, child, 'cause this is where the story comes full circle, where suffering transforms into testimony, where the silenced voice finally speaks its truth, where a name hidden for decades in fear can finally be spoken aloud in freedom. This here's about years later, about survival beyond the nightmare, about how memory becomes medicine for future generations. The year was 1867. The war had come and gone, leaving the South in ruins, but slavery in the grave where it belonged. 20 years had passed since that November night when 47 souls walked away from Hawthorne plantation, following fire and freedom. Of those 47, only 19 reached Canada alive. 8 was captured by paddy rollers within the first week and returned to bondage, or worse. 12 died on the journey, from cold, from hunger, from the guns of slave catchers who saw black bodies running north as profit running away. 3 gave up partway and turned themselves in, too exhausted to continue. But 19 made it. Sweet Jesus, 19 souls touched free soil and never looked back. Afi was one of them. She'd led the group north with Mother Bess's wisdom and Big Moses's strength, following the underground railroad station by station, hiding in root cellars, traveling by night, wading through cold rivers to throw off the dogs. They'd been helped by Quaker families who risked everything, by freed black communities who shared their meager resources, by conductors whose names they never learned but whose courage saved their lives. Mother Bess died 3 months into the journey, peacefully in her sleep at a safe house in Pennsylvania. Before she passed, she'd pressed her conjure bag into Afi's hands and whispered, "You the keeper now. You carry the knowledge forward. Don't let our people forget where they came from or what they survived." Big Moses made it all the way to Ontario, Canada, where he opened a blacksmith shop and never forged another chain for the rest of his life. Martha settled in a small town outside Toronto, married a freed man from Georgia, and started a school for black children. Old Aunt Dinah lived 5 more years in freedom before age took her home to the ancestors. And Afi? She settled in a place called Buxton, a thriving community of formerly enslaved people who'd built their own church, their own farms, their own future. She lived in a small cabin with a garden where she grew herbs, teaching herself the root work Mother Bess had shown her, becoming the settlement's healer and midwife. But she never forgot. Lord have mercy, she never forgot. Now, on this cold December evening in 1867, she sat in her cabin surrounded by her grandchildren, 5 of them, ranging in age from 4 to 12. Her daughter Sarah, named after young Sarah who'd made the journey north with them, sat knitting by the fire, her belly round with her 4th child. And there, warming his hands by the hearth, sat a young man of 26 with eyes that Afi recognized, even though she hadn't seen them in over 20 years. Josiah. They'd found each other 2 years prior, through the network of freed people searching for lost family members. He'd survived slavery in Georgia, survived the war fighting for the Union, and now worked as a school teacher in a town 50 miles away. When the letter arrived saying a woman matching his mama's description, one eye blind, scarred from torture, carrying a story about a hot box and a key, was living in Buxton, he'd dropped everything and come. The reunion had been wordless at first, just 2 people holding each other and weeping for all the years stolen, all the pain endured, all the love that had never stopped despite distance and time. Now, 2 years later, he visited often, and tonight he'd brought his own children to meet their grandmother. The youngest, a boy of 4, looked up at Afi with innocent curiosity. "Grandmama," he said in the sweet voice of childhood, "Papa says you was a hero in the old days. Says you fought the slave master and won. Is that true?" Afi's one good eye, the other still milky white and blind, looked at the child with infinite tenderness. The scars on her face had faded some with age, but they was still visible, a permanent reminder of 90 days in hell. Her hair, what little had grown back, was now completely white despite her being only 50-some years old. "Come here, baby," she said. And all 5 grandchildren gathered close, settling on the floor at her feet like she was a queen holding court. Even Josiah and Sarah leaned in to listen, though they'd heard the story before. Afi reached beneath her dress and pulled out a leather cord. Hanging from it was an iron key, worn smooth from years of touching. The African symbols Moses had carved still faintly visible. "This here's a key," she began, her voice carrying the weight of memory and the strength of survival. "But it ain't just any key. This is the key that unlocked a prison. This is the key that turned suffering into power. This is the key that proved even in the darkest times, even when evil seems strongest, justice can still find a way." She told them the story then, all of it. The cabin invasion, the 90 days in the hot box, the visions of ancestors, the name her mama gave her that she'd hidden for decades. She told them about Big Moses forging the key in secret, about the poison delivered 3 drops at a time, about the kiss that killed, about locking the master in his own torture chamber. She told them about the 9 days of his suffering, about the fire that burned down the big house, about the journey north that cost so many lives, but won freedom for those who survived. The children listened with wide eyes, barely breathing. When she finished, the cabin was silent except for the crackle of the fire. Then the oldest grandchild, a girl of 12, spoke. "But Grandmama, everybody calls you Mrs. Williams. That ain't your real name, is it?" Afi smiled, an expression that transformed her scarred face into something beautiful. "No, baby. That's the name I took when I married your grandpapa, rest his soul. And before that, the white folks called me Peggy, because that's the name they give me when they stole my mama from Africa and brought her here in chains." "So what's your real name?" the youngest boy asked. Afi looked at each face gathered around her. These children born in freedom, who would never know chains, who would grow up able to read and write and dream without limit. She thought about her mama Ayodele whispering secrets in the slave cabin, about the promise to never speak her true name until she was free. Well, she was free now, free for 20 years, free enough to speak what had been hidden for so long. "My true name," she said slowly, letting each word carry its full weight. "The name my mama gave me the day I was born. The name she whispered so the white folks couldn't steal it, is Afi. It means born on Friday in the Yoruba language. And Friday's children is fighters, survivors, warriors who don't break no matter how hard the world tries to crush them." She stood, her old bones creaking but her spine still straight, still strong. She raised the key above her head like a sword, like a scepter, like a symbol of everything she'd endured and overcome. "I am Afi," she declared, her voice ringing through the cabin. "Daughter of Ayodele who survived the Middle Passage, mother of Josiah who survived Georgia, grandmother of free children who will never wear chains. I am the woman who locked the master in the hot box and walked away. I am the keeper of the key, the bearer of the testimony, the voice of all them who couldn't speak." Tears ran down her face, not tears of sorrow now, but tears of triumph, of completion, of a circle finally closed. "And I want you to remember this, all of you," she continued, looking at each grandchild in turn. "Remember that resistance is possible. Remember that justice, though delayed, can still arrive. Remember that our people survived the unsurvivable and emerged stronger. Remember the names, Ayodele, Josiah, Big Moses, Mother Bess, all of them. Remember the stories, because memory is how we honor the dead and teach the living." She sat back down, suddenly exhausted but profoundly satisfied. Josiah came and knelt beside her chair, taking her weathered hand in his. "Thank you, Mama," he said quietly, "for surviving, for fighting, for finding me again, for being strong enough to tell this story." Afi touched his face with her free hand, the same way she'd done when he was 6 years old, before they tore him away. "Thank you for living, baby. Thank you for making it through. Thank you for bringing these beautiful children into the world." Outside, snow began to fall, soft and gentle, covering the Canadian landscape in white. Inside the warm cabin, the grandchildren asked more questions. And Afi answered them all, her voice growing stronger with each word spoken, each memory shared, each truth told. The fire burned low. The night grew late. But before everyone went to bed, Afi made them promise something. Promise me you'll tell this story to your children, and make them promise to tell theirs. Don't let it die. Don't let the world forget what happened in them slave quarters, on them plantations in that hot box. Because those who suffered, they suffered. Those who resisted, they left their mark. And memory is what we carry forward. We promise, Grandmama Afi, they said in unison. And as the family settled in for the night, as freedom breathed through every corner of that small Canadian cabin, Afi closed her good eye and smiled. She'd kept her promise to her mama. She'd spoken her true name. She'd survived to tell the tale. And now the story would live on through these children and their children and all the generations to come. The hot box was just iron and memory now. The plantation was ashes. The master was long dead, died mad and broken within a year of that terrible November. But Afi was alive, was free, was surrounded by love and legacy. And that child, that was the sweetest victory of all. Those who suffered, suffered. Those who resisted left memory, and memory we keep here in the echoes from the quarters. May these voices never be silenced. May these stories never die. May justice, though long delayed, always find its way home.